All right, and I believe we are live. Let's see how. Where should I place you? Let's place you here. Let's see how the audio sounds like, because that's always the main issue. Bruce, how have you been doing?
I've been depressed. Everything I'm
Uh
seeing
oh.
in the social media, everything I'm seeing, with just everything, critical race theory, vaccines, all this other stuff. It's just, oh my god, what the hell's going on?
It really makes you want to turn a blind eye to everything that you see in the world, especially since especially since a lot of people sort of have real world issues to attend to, and they can only spend so much energy actually looking at what's going on Twitter, what's going on in the world, and stressing out about that on top of stressing out on top of personal issues. So I understand people's willing negligence, I suppose, for a lack of a better term. I 100% get it. I've I'm young. I don't like to say things like the times nowadays has never been more divided than in the history of society, because quite frankly, I don't know, and I would heavily doubt that, considering that we actually had a legitimate civil war. But I, I times certainly aren't. They're not good. They're not great. I It is legitimately divided. I've had to tiptoe around with what I say. Not that I was ever this sort of annoying, rambunctious debater in places where I worked or in places where I was taught, but I noticed that I'd have to be careful with what I say, even something that wouldn't be if I were to say something that I wouldn't have considered controversial 5 years ago, might be considered controversial nowadays. And so you have to just sort of be careful. And I don't think we were talking about this before we started live streaming. I don't think times are going to get better. I think we're only going to get more and more divided, and I think it's just going to be a matter of us allocating to the new rules of engagement that are going to occur in the next 5 years or 10 years or however long it takes. And just hope that whoever wins is someone who largely agrees with us and who will try to enact policy like banning CRT or enforcing it in universities or in public schools. I think it's just going to be a matter of that. I don't think we're going to be able to solve this partisan divide that's been sort of becoming bigger and bigger since, I want to say, 2014 or 15. I think that we're just going to have to get used to it until we go extinct.
Yeah, I think you're right, but I hope you're wrong. The How do I say this? It really does feel like we're just. I mean, we're already there. We're already separated into major tribes, and I wanted to talk about this a little bit later tonight, but like we're separating so easily into two dominant tribes, and that are driven by the crazies on each end. We got the right-wing Republican Party who just over fetishize like stuffing nationalism to the nth degree and bastardizing it, and you get the same thing with the quote unquote liberal left wing that just has taken something as noble as diversity and just completely turned it into something that's just completely heinous. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and You get these two. You get a large segment of the public that are just that work an everyday job, don't really look into philosophy, don't really are not aware of the foundational principles of their own democracy, just falling in one direction or the other. And you really see that between the woke um, and the national and extreme nationalists, for lack of a better term.
Mm-hmm. Now,
Yeah, and we see how the with the intellectual dark web, I would have thought that we would have understood the need for a little bit more nuance in our views, and in being able to to really parse things out with a fine tooth comb. But even among this new intellectual crowd, there's been even more fracturing lately between the vaccines and those who prefer like a more a treatment with a more conventional drug, like say ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine, which I believe has been debunked. I might change my mind on that in the future, but that's my opinion as of now.
yeah,
And we continue to see that, and this is just it
now,
really is something else.
yeah. So we have a special guest here today. Bruce, everything you said was brilliant, and I agree with it, and it horrifies me. but we also have a special guest here today, none other than Nick Cano or Cano, who's had amazing stories, largely revolving around his neighbor. But he's had amazing. he's.
I got a letter from her the other day.
Oh, what's the update?
Oh, because I think I told you we're in. Actually, can I share my screen? I want to like put that big that thing she put up in her front yard last year.
Oh, go for it.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find it. Yeah, I'm cool with it being live stream. Yeah, that I live next door to it. Basically, imagine an online troll on Twitter in real life.
An online.
I have to say that like Nick occasionally shares stories about a psycho roommate to all of us, and it's been the source of entertainment that I've needed to get past this last year and a half. It's if any of you out there need a source of daily entertainment from the depression that's destroying our world, you contact and friend Nick Cano is a good guy. He's got his amazing stories about his psycho neighbor.
Hang on, I'm going to try and find this. Hang on. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you what. You guys know. I worked on. I can say this. I worked on Zara K's case at the start of this year. Yeah, like we had one guy in there who was a really well-known human rights activist, and I added him on Facebook, and he just calls me up one day, and says, I think I've worked out why you're not scared of the Tanzanian government or Islamic terrorists. It's this neighbor of yours.
She's deadlier than the other two combined.
Oh yeah, like. Okay, I'm going to share my screen so you can actually see this. Hang on. That was her front yard.
Are you sharing your screen? Oh, there we go. I got to add it to the stream. Okay.
Yeah. That's her front yard.
Christ.
See what I mean? Like a literal online Twitter troll in real life.
So what are those messages exactly? What does it say on those pieces of paper?
She put this out in public, so I can say, but she basically saying that she's been wrongfully accused, and the truth will come out about people that have accused her of things and stuff. So it's just the one on the rake is my favorite.
I like the one on the rake, yeah, because she ran out of trees. So that one's funny. This is horrifying.
So Nick, what you're saying is like she's pretty much just trying to justify her actions, like Reza Aslan does for Islam.
Yeah, she's the neighborhood Reza Aslan.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, so that's probably a horrifying experience, and tantamount to what you read in Yasmin Mohammed's book Unveiled. But I really do wish the best for you, because that really is scary. But by the way, Nick, how's life in Australia right now? Because I know that you guys are sort of having a resurgence of this virus. So how's life on your end?
Well, where I am in New South Wales, we've had the worst of it. So we had the Delta outbreak mid-June, and we've been in lockdown ever since. I thought I'll be another lockdown for a week or two, and it's now September. They basically didn't lock down hard enough, so as a result, the Delta variant has just spread through the country. There was quite a bit of vaccine hesitancy at the start because our government didn't secure enough Pfizer. They decided to go with AstraZeneca because it would be cheaper. And with the information out there about blood clots, very, very, very rare blood clots, I'll just say, I'm no expert on vaccines. You should not take advice from me and speak to your doctor. But yeah, there was concern about the AstraZeneca and then the Delta variant, because the government had said they don't want anybody under 60 to get it. But then when the Delta happened, they said, oh, no, it's safe. And people are like, well, now you're gaslighting us. So they should have just said it was safe from the beginning.
Yeah, but don't you guys have a stockpile of bleach or ultraviolet lights out there?
Oh, yeah. Bleach. We can inject ourselves with bleach. Holy shit, that guy was president for 4 years.
Yeah, he was. My, oh my. And how times have changed now. We were talking about this before the live stream, where we sort of trying to analyze the Biden presidency, what's been going on. And, I will say that I was absolutely dead wrong about what I assumed was going to happen once Biden took presidency. I was wrong. My assumption would have been that, yes, Biden would have been somewhat wokey oriented. I assumed that Biden would have just been your general boring sort of neoliberal centrist, and he certainly was with Afghanistan. But my assumption when it comes to cultural issues was that it would have been some sort of not damage control, sorry, the exact opposite of that. It would have, we would have recalibrated in a way that this culture war thing wouldn't have been that big of an issue anymore. I was dead wrong.
Yeah.
Instead, what occurred was that Biden went full-blown wokey, either because he actually thinks he's doing what is correct, or he's following the lead of Kamala Harris, who's going to run for president undoubtedly in the next upcoming election, because Biden's not going to do it. No. And now we are looking at a culturally far left presidency versus a culturally insane, traditionalist right. And so this is what I was telling Bruce. I don't think this is going to heal. I think we're going to have to live in a world in which we choose between these sort of, CRT and infested ideology versus the overturning of abortion laws, which is what just recently happened in Texas, which is like insane. Like between a woke world and what's going on right now in Texas, like I prefer the woke world for sure. But the fact that we even have to choose is absolutely nonsense. Why do we have to choose between these two evils?
It's like saying treatment of women here isn't as bad as Saudi Arabia. It's like, okay, great. Well, it doesn't have to be as bad as Saudi Arabia to be bad.
Yeah, you could still, that was sort of like, I was a bit annoyed by some of the arguments that, people on the anti-woke side, when they said, well, why are you focusing on feminist issues in the United States when people in the Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia, women over there are being treated monstrously? I mean, both things, it can be true that is occurring while also focusing on some of the issues that we have here at home. It's not a one thing or the other. And I think it's the same thing here. We don't have to choose between the Biden presidency and the Trump presidency when it comes to social issues. I think we can also, the expectation should be that we should be able to pick a good alternative to those two, but we're not given the choice because of the two-party system. I mean, me and Bruce were talking about this earlier, where Andrew Yang is coming up with a third party. Yeah, good luck making sure that that's going to get any traction. It's not. I like Andrew Yang. I think he's great. Exactly. I think the amount of hate that he gets is undeserved, and I don't understand why he gets so much hate. I guess because he's not Bernie Sanders and he considers himself to be a capitalist. But whatever Andrew Yang is going to do, it's not going to work. We're deadlocked in this two-party system. We're deadlocked in which you have these politicians who want to get as many votes as possible, and they recognize that in order to do that, they have to flame the wars, fan the flames of the culture wars. And so you have Trump, who's sort of staying silent about abortion. If you look at some old interviews that he did on CNN back then, he was pro-abortion. Now he's certainly not. If you look at, what Biden is saying about CRT or about Antifa, he'll say things that well, Antifa is just an idea. I mean, these are the two things that we have to pick from. And what worries me is that because people on that regard, people are going to say okay, well, we have to pick between these two things. There's no point in me endorsing a third party or endorsing some sort of nuance between those two positions, because one, nuance is a bad word on Twitter, but two, because there's no point. There's no point. It doesn't matter how many people scream for a third party. The two-party system has so much institutional and governmental power that there is literally no point. So they're just going to decide to vote for the lesser of two evils, and I think we're stuck with that. I think this sort of partisanship is going to get worse and worse, and we're just going to have to learn to live with it.
I hope that's not the case, certainly, because I totally agree with just about everything you said there, Vince. And there's definitely, I think, a lot of social and economic interest in keeping the duopoly in place. But I also have to believe to some degree that there's enough fed up people out there for there to be potentially be some kind of breakthrough. I mean, I'm probably completely naive speaking about this in this kind of fashion, but names like Andrew Yang had some effect out there, and Tulsi Gabbard is another individual who I think actually had she provided yet another figure for people to look up to, and I don't know if those two know each other, but I like to see them. I like to see them support one another and to have some kind of effort to try to break this duopoly that we have. If anything's to happen, then something drastic has to happen from the ground up, not from the other way around. Is it feasible? Is it feasible? I doubt it. But if the former IDW has hinted at anything, is that people are starved for ideas, and there is probably more of a center ground to be established than I thought. However, I could be very, very wrong about this. Like you, I was hoping Biden would dampen down the extremism, the CRT. But what he ended up doing was just swing the pendulum in the other direction. So it's like we're caught. We're right now we're caught in a battle between the two morons, and we're kind of stuck.
Like, I think that, kind of with, like, last year with the election, I think the choice was obvious. Even, like, we basically had to do our, deal with the devil. And I think taking woke CRT, I haven't read too much CRT, but I think taking that is better than 4 more years of Trump. It's like you said, though, we shouldn't have to choose between the two. I've always, Bruce and I have talked about this privately. Like, I personally, I view the far right as still more dangerous than the far left, because, like, the far left is getting in there and they're putting some questionable ideas into kids' heads. But, and as we can see with a more right-wing movement like the Republicans in the US over the last couple of weeks, they've literally taken away women's rights, women's autonomy over their bodies. And my ultimate fear with some of this stuff on the left is it's going to become impossible to fight the far right, because they've made so many stupid arguments over the last few years. Like, I've seen, I shared in the group chat some woman saying that the attack on 9/11 was rebellion against the the heteropatriarchal West. It's like, oh yeah, I'm sure if there's one thing Al Qaeda hates, it's heteropatriarchy. But the thing is, when you make, like, some of the people who are woke, or some of the CRT people, they have some legitimate observations and problems with inequality in the West. But when they then engage in moral relativism, they completely destroy their credibility. Like, if you can't condemn the treatment of women in Saudi Arabia and Iran, you have absolutely no credibility to then do it in the West, where, even though there's still a lot of inequalities that exist, either on an income basis or with domestic violence, or as we've seen with Republicans in the US, it's night and day. There's no comparison.
What I often say is that I think, quantitatively speaking, the right is more dangerous than the left. I don't think anybody would be concerned about that. But what concerns me, and why I focus more on the left, even though I recognize that the right is more dangerous. And we actually did another podcast with Christoph at Halakaholism recently.
Oh yeah.
And so this
Dalai Lama of shitty leftist cold takes.
Yeah, the shitty leftist cold takes. He's great, but what I argued was that the reason why I focus more on the left is because of the people who consistently say things like, yeah, sure, the left is bad, but the right is so much worse. People have been saying that since the 90s. And the reason why the left is gaining more and more traction, more and more popularity, why we are now looking at a university system that is 13-1 liberal versus conservative, why we are looking at corporate media prioritizing social justice causes over any social justice cause that would be perceived good by the right. The reason why that's happening is because what do you mean, facts?
Oh, they'll sometimes prioritize narratives over facts.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, exactly. And so the reason why they do that is because people always turned a blind eye to it, because it wasn't that big of a deal. And the big gut punch to me is the fall of the academy. That to me is the big gut punch. And I always say that if I were to ever write a book, it would be about the fall of the university system, because that used to be the bastion of intelligentsia. That used to be the bastion of knowledge acquisition. And so we went from a university system in which J.J. Thomson discovered the electron. We split the atom. We managed to, Cambridge has the highest number of Nobel Prizes in physics in the world. We went from that to now allowing these really heavily religious academic disciplines in there. And so, and it's a big problem when you ask a professor, like, well, why wouldn't you allow a young Earth creationist to teach a physics class? Oh, because they use the wrong methodology. They don't abide by the peer review system, and so the way that they acquiesce knowledge is not university based. Well, that's almost the same thing with 95% of your sociology departments, because they're pretty much anti-empiricism. They're anti-scientific method. So why are you letting them infest the university system, but not these theologians? And so they're not going to be able to have an answer. And so that happened because people kept saying the same thing over and over and over again. Let's just focus on the right. You can focus on the right while also focusing on the excesses of the left. And so that's why I focus on them more. I remember Lawrence Krauss wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal, And he talks about this. He said, when I was a professor, like I think he was at Harvard, he was an adjunct professor or something at Harvard, he saw this crazy like woke stuff in the sociological departments. He saw it. He this sort of, constructivism that was occurring. It was there, but he didn't really pay that much attention because back then it wasn't really that popular. And again, Lawrence Krauss was someone who was heavily influenced by Noam Chomsky. So he was like a hard left sort of economic foreign policy sort of guy. And so that's what he focused on. And a lot of professors back then did as well. And because of that, because people turned a blind eye to what was occurring in these sociological departments, it became big. It infested, and now it's too hard to control. Now, good luck being a conservative on campus. I'm not a conservative, and I think many of the things that they believe are dog shit. But there's a reason why we need a balance between liberal viewpoints and conservative viewpoints. It's not because of this sort of, weird idea that equal time, equal viewpoints, or whatever. No, it's because it balances out your bias. If you're just in a room filled with people who agree with you, psychology states that you're more likely to come up with crazier and crazier ideas because you're just filled in a group of people that smell each other's farts and no one's criticizing you. You need
My farts
criticism.
are awesome, by the way.
I'm sure Australian farts are better than American farts, but that's a huge issue, and so that's why I focus on that, because we need people to focus on it, and the people that the people who focus on it right now, the people like Candace Owens, like Ben Shapiro, they've always existed. They're just right-wing conservatives,
and they're doing it for the wrong reasons. Like, I mean,
they're
if you
doing it
look
for
at
the wrong
what they
reasons,
actually stand for,
Candace is just doing it to gain clout. She just like she'll get on stage and just like and just turn it all into a rant against liberals, and unfortunately, with how crazy the left has been acting, they've justifiably given her a lot of ammo to use in her rants. I mean, like, speaking about the academy, you talk about what happened to Peter Boghossian. I've spoken to Peter many times. I've been hoping that he would keep his job, but as you know, Peter's a really smart guy. I read both of his books. I've spoken to him, and I like the way he enunciates things, how he explains philosophical concepts. And what ended up happening this last week, he ended up resigning from Portland State University, and two things happened. One, the kids who really need teachers like Peter out there have lost a great teacher. And number two, the woke have gained yet another victory. And what do we have out there on our campuses? Most college campuses do not have professors that can identify as conservative, can offer a different viewpoint. And Peter used to, if you listen to his podcast with Barry Weiss, or if you even read the Substack article that he just published, he used to invite people into his classes who were of different belief. Who came from different belief systems, Christian fundamentalists, flat Earth, people who believe in the flat Earth ideas, and whatever.
Did you say flat Earth?
Yeah, nice shirt. Yeah.
Members around the globe, baby.
Shirt. Yeah.
Very inclusive group.
He would have these people explain their viewpoints to the students, and they would get an idea. It's like, whoa, this person actually thinks that. They would be exposed to different ideas. Now, if you try to do that nowadays, what, like you would get called like a white supremacist, a Nazi, you deserve to be punched, that kind of crap. And just what has happened to our universities? I mean, I go in Clubhouse fairly often, and people have spoken about the need to maybe defund our universities now. And previously, I thought the idea was hyperbole, but the more and more I see of where the woke are coming from, the crazy ideas, I'm starting to think that this may be a necessity. And our institutions, the major ones, from entertainment to corporations and wherever, I think we need new ones now that can arise independently of the woke, because the woke are everywhere.
Yeah, I've got my own personal disagreements with Peter, but if you find him to be really offensive and like he's too far, you're a useless person as far as I'm concerned. I mean, he's a pretty harmless guy. But kind of my concern is also that, because obviously, I think there's more with the far left. There's kind of an issue with them, getting their ideas and their tentacles in. Because the thing is, unlike the right, I think they're identifying legitimate problems. So for here, an example, in Australia, I listed a couple of things. We've also got a lot of Indigenous deaths in custody. But like, doing idiotic things like saying we should defund the police. But something that does actually concern me is real life violence and terrorism. So there's been some investigations. There's been neo-Nazi going into like ad hoc training camps, and they're starting to go underground. And if you look at when things get violent, the right is almost always worse, because nobody woke has gone into a mosque with a machine gun yet. But I think, because I don't want to do, this is worse, so then this doesn't matter. But this is kind of just where I'm coming from. It's like, I feel that my concern is that this is a bigger problem, but this is not going to help us. If anything, this is going to make this worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, I don't. No one here is arguing that the far left is more dangerous than the far right. The right.
But if Antifa got their hands on guns, I'd be more scared of them hurting themselves and their intended target.
That one I actually might be concerned. Antifa is actually pretty like fucking crazy. But
they're just the most incompetent, violent people I've ever seen.
You should have visited Chaz, man. By the way, I should also say hello to the comment section. So Murtad Skeptic saying, "Hey guys." Matthew Niderfer saying, "Hi sexies." Now he said this before Nick came in, so I don't know if he would have said this after Nick came in. So who knows?
Yeah, guys, I really
how you doing?
Cut, so we can't go to the barbershop at the moment because of the freaking lockdown.
Get a bowl and then just sort of cut around it. That's what I do. And then Nick Kano, this guy sounds familiar. Audio's good. Oh, thank you.
Douchebag?
And Jesus, agree. Vincent, what's the abomination of a globe doing in the back? That's right. So I have a globe over here now, and you have a flat Earth shirt. So there's some tension here. But here's the thing: even though Nick Kano is a flat earther, even though he prefers ivermectin over an actual vaccine, even though he voted Trump, even though we're still friends,
I voted Trump even though I live in Australia.
You managed, because
I was one of the many false votes that swung the election.
Exactly, yeah. So we can still be friends, right? It's perfectly fine. It doesn't matter that he wrote a bunch of blogs talking about the pandemic or whatever. We're still friends. And then Murtad Skeptic over here again saying these groups will point out real problems or problems that have some real root, which are compelling, but then they have bizarre solutions. Yeah, they have. They have weird ones. And so, you have some. I was actually telling Murtad this. So
he also says Australia isn't real.
It's real, but it's upside down. That's the only thing that we need to. So with I recently had a class, right, a religious studies class, and my professor's favorite philosopher is Michel Foucault. So Michel Foucault is a French philosopher, debated actually Noam Chomsky again on the topic of postmodernism and moral relativism. So Foucault is one of these people who would come out and say you can't say you have a moral issue with the Taliban or with the Taliban's treatment of women now that they took control of Afghanistan. So his solution to a lot of these social problems would be a postmodern solution, would be sort of you need to bring down the sort of white cis patriarchy that has pestilentially spread throughout the United States since its conception. So he would be he's like a woke favorite. And James Lindsay, say what you will about James Lindsay, I
got a lot to say about James Lindsay.
You could say that. But his book, Cynical Theories, I always recommend it. It's a legitimately great book, and it's a legitimately great academic investigation into what happened. And
he did a lot of really good work before Trump.
Mm-hmm.
But before the last election.
Yeah. And I still consider him. I disagree with a lot of what he says, but at the same time, I'd be a hypocrite if I said I no longer liked him. I do like him because if you were to give me David Pakman and a list of things that I disagree with him on, I'd probably disagree more with David Pakman actually, and more with Kyle Kalinske or Jimmy Dore. And I still like.
You're talking to a David Pakman fanboy here.
Oh, that's disgusting. All right, now we can't be friends. Yeah. No, but James Lindsay legitimately did a great investigation into what occurred in these woke universities. And if anything, I actually applaud him for bringing this to the public consciousness, because before Cynical Theories and before New Discourses, no one had any idea about where a lot of these French philosophers were coming from or where these ideas were coming from.
But that's kind of, sorry to cut you off again, but that's kind of my frustration with him, is that he's done a lot of good work, but now he's completely
Tarnished it.
Yeah, he's completely tarnished it with this absolute nonsense he's coming out with.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah,
it's
but
completely
with
destroyed his
him,
reputation.
yeah. Well, with him, so here would be my argument, and I'm gonna tie this back to what I originally said. If what I said at the beginning of this podcast is true, that we're not going to alleviate this sort of partisanship issue that's going to be occurring in the United States, it's just going to be a matter of choosing one side versus the other, making sure that your side has the most amount of institutional power. If that is true, then James is actually correct in his tactics, because he's just garnering more and more attention, because the original tactic would have been to try to get the sort of centrist right, the centrist left, right, who is sort of tame on these sorts of issues. They recognize that the left has some excesses. They're left-leaning. If the main goal was to try to get those people, or to get sensible leftists onto his side, I mean, that goal failed. It failed miserably. And so if the issue then now is just making sure that your side has the most amount of power, I think he's actually doing what needs to be done. And that's me, and I'm saying that recognizing that I disagree with a lot of what he said. I didn't vote for Trump. I'm not. I wouldn't be on Fox News. I wouldn't be fighting alongside people like Dave Rubin. I wouldn't be doing that. But if it is the case that partisanship is here to stay, and we just have to gain as much power as we possibly can, then I think he's actually doing what needs to be done.
I think it's a decent steelman, Vince, because I like Jim a lot. I think I personally really like the guy, even though I have some disagreements with with what's going on there. But what I would have to say about that is how serious, what kind of threat, what kind of issue what kind of disaster that you could see going down the horizon would get you to take drastic measures and to take a direction that you originally may not have considered? That's the question I have to ask myself when it comes to having to deal with a problem of this magnitude, because while we're talking about the right could have, we speak about how you would probably live in a world dominated by the woke rather than the right. I think I agree with that, but by a slim margin. But I think we also all agree that Wokistani is also not a place that we want to be, especially not when China is really rearing its head. So, how far do you go to solve this? Do you solve this problem when there are no other really good alternatives on the horizon? Let's face it, there really aren't. That's why I'm hoping this third party by Andrew Yang really takes off, even though I don't think it will, because we need another alternative. All I see is rising bipartisanship, and if Biden's performance so far is in any indication, I think that's the direction that the Democratic Party has decided to go. And if they try to run Kamala Harris in a few years, she's going to get her ass kicked.
Oh yeah,
by whoever the right runs. It'll be easy pickings.
It'll be Trump.
Easy pickings. Yeah.
How woke is she exactly? Because she was a cop. She was a prosecutor for a long time, and and she's not to the same degree as somebody like, I don't know, maybe AOC, who I don't hate as much as you guys do. But kind of my worry is that I don't think the CRT is going to push a lot of bad ideas, and it could push a lot of our, a lot of the progress we've made. It could push us backwards. But again, I think Republicans are going to take away basic rights. I was listening to Secular Jihadist podcast last night with Andrew Seidel, Ali Rizvi, and Susanna, and they were saying that with this, they can now start to go after LGBT rights, even potentially contraception. So they could maybe undo gay marriage, and they could start to say, well, contraception is a form of abortion. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty scary to my mind. That's a lot of the time some people say, oh, it's just like The Handmaid's Tale, but that's actually starting to get like it.
Yeah, so in a world, as I said this before, and the reason why I'm not joining James Lindsay on his tactics, is because between a woke world and versus, let's not even say far-right conservative world, let's just say your boring Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens, Michael Knowles, conservative social worlds, Between those two things, I'd prefer the woke one, because on the one end, yeah, you have crazy things like CRT, and I think 98% of the things in CRT is garbage. But you have that on one end, and on the other hand, you have social conservatism. You just don't. You don't only have the overturning of Roe v. Wade. You also have, as you said, maybe they're going to outlaw gay marriage again. Maybe they're going to do something about contraception.
Well, like in Europe, there's been talk with the far right. Some of them want to actually close mosques, and no fan of Islam, but people should be allowed to go to whatever holy place they want to.
They're going to institute prayer in schools, which is something that was been debated in, I want to say it was actually Texas, like in the mid 2000s, pretty recent. Between those two worlds, I'm going to go down the woke route, because just on the basis of human rights, I'd prefer that. And so that's why for me, I either fight for a sort of nuanced position between these two things, or I just don't fight at all. I don't want to have to fight alongside people like Michel Foucault, like Derrida, like Lyotard, just because, well, at least people get to, I don't know. That's what concerns me, and it's music, as I was saying, also take away AIDS medication. Yeah, so there's exactly. So it's not even just going to be things that are simple, like no longer being able to marry a person of the same sex. It's not simple things like that. It's also going to be access to healthcare that is related to those sorts of issues. Like you saw what was going on in the military with the trans women. It's going to be issues like that as well. So between these two worlds, I'm going to pick the woke side versus the far right side. And again, I shouldn't even say far right. That's just social conservatism. That's what it's always been. It's not just traditionalist values of the nuclear family, like something like Jeffrey Miller would advocate for that sort of thing. It's not just that. When you side alongside people like Ben Shapiro, you're also going to get some of that other baggage. And I don't want that baggage. I think that baggage is really dangerous. It's really disgusting. But that's why it really just concerns me that we have to either choose one or the other.
Bruce, you had oh, sorry, I cut you off, Vince.
No, by all means.
Bruce, you had an incident of this recently. Are you comfortable sharing that, or where you found
which one are you referring to?
There was somebody that you were potentially going to work alongside, but okay.
So the deal is, I totally hear what you're saying here, Vince. And one incident that the one Nick's mentioning illustrates this. It's I don't really want to say I'd go down the woke side either, but it's really a toss up between that and going down the side of the right ones. Okay, so I'm part of. I work with FAIR. I work with I try to get involved in stops into anti-CRT groups, and the ones I'm a part of have a true liberal bent. Progressivism based on reason, a fair telling of U.S. history that's not filled with crap from the 1619 Project, all that stuff. And it's a gathering of people from all over that's really concerned about CRT infiltration. But we've had some interesting characters join on at times. One of which, what I thought was fairly appalling, was one individual who was talking about dealing with the radical left. And we're all liberals here, and we're all concerned about the illiberalism of the illiberal left, the woke, the regressive left, whatever. And this one individual came on, and when he was describing radical left, when he was talking about critical race theory, okay, I'm all with him there. But when you start mentioning stuff like LGBT as part of radical left, hey, you've gone way too far. And I challenged him on that. I caused a little bit of a shit fit. And this guy started arguing the same way people used to argue back when Prop 8 was brought up in California, saying, oh, it's not natural. They teach you this stuff in schools. I'm sorry, but lesbian, gay, transgender, and bisexuality, those are all completely legitimate. The problem with the woke is that they've taken them a degree way too far. It's based in unreason, in as much as Christian fundamentalism is. That's why we oppose it. We're against this because we're against racism. We're against this because we're against this because we're against bigotry.
I've got a friend who grew up in Iran, and he said, I didn't leave the Islamic Republic of Iran to listen to more dogma.
Exactly. And you see this guy take a legitimate movement and throw it under the under the umbrella of radical left. So yeah, fight the illiberal left because of the kind of the social power it has, and because of the dogmatism and the threat it has to our institutions. But you have to be very, very clear on what you mean by radical left here, because it's important to draw a line of distinction between genuine social justice causes and how we approach them, as opposed to just to letting it, as opposed to falling into the dogmatism that the right has. I mean, like, I've said it before. I know many conservative people who I respect. There's nothing wrong with being right wing. There's nothing wrong with being left wing. But if you go too far down in either direction, you find out you fall into the brand of identity politics that each side fetishes, the extreme nationalism of the right and the perverted diversity ideas of the left.
Yeah, like, I mean, there does also need to be a space, I think, for acceptable right-wing politics. Like, I think we do a little bit, like, our politics here are a little bit more moderate. We do have some concerning kind of more far right, or, getting close to the far right type of political pundits. But for the most part, there is a ground for acceptable right-wing politics, I think, because, there are some valid ideas in conservative economic ideas and that sort of thing. But I'm kind of worried about, like, people lumping every kind of conservative right-wing idea into the far right, kind of like what this person was doing with everything that's good on the left being far left. Because then it's like the boy who cried wolf. When it actually does come up, you don't have any kind of ground to stand on.
Yeah, and let me try to steel man sort of someone who would respond to us talking about these crazy people on the right who are anti-woke, but then they're also like adopt these crazy viewpoints. Or
well, it's kind of like, if I might throw out another one, it's kind of like people that they say legitimate things about Islam, but then they want Muslim bans, and they don't want any brown people coming in. So they're like taking a legitimate talking point and using it to push a genuinely racist or bigoted point of view.
Yeah. So to steel man the argument, like, all of us have said the same thing, right? That the right is worse, and so if we had to choose, we'd probably pick the woke left. Let me steel man an argument against that. So someone might say something along the lines of, sure, but we know what the far rights or that version of the right is capable of. We know what it entails because they've had government power for quite some time. 2008, Barack Obama would have been considered a social conservative now in 2021. He wasn't for gay marriage when he first ran, and when he was first elected, he probably would have been considered a social conservative. So we sort of know that side of things. We don't really know what the left is capable of because they're sort of barely getting power right now on social status, right? So they all follow the same books. If you listen to a lot of liberal professors in your sociology department, they all pretty much quote the same philosophers. So they love French philosophy, so they'll tend to quote people like Foucault. And if you read deeper into Foucault and what he says, he'll say things that are strictly anti-liberal Enlightenment values. And he says this himself. That's not a straw man characterization of what he's saying. Critical race theory itself, in the first 10 pages of an introduction to critical race theory by Richard Delgado, it explicitly states it is critical, and it it is critical of liberal Enlightenment values. It says that this is not conducive to a functioning democracy, and not only that, but it is also critical of the concept of a democracy itself. So the stuff that we're hearing about critical race theory and about the woke left, it's really just sort of surface level stuff. But if they were to gain power, and if they were to have power for the same amount of time that social conservatism has had power, we might see way crazier stuff. And then we might change our minds. Then once they had power, enough time to actually sort of flesh out to the full extent of what their ideology actually means, then we might think differently. So that's what someone might say. Yeah, sure, social conservatism is worse than the woke left, but that's because social conservatism has had so much time and so much power, and that's to the extent that it's going to get. The woke left has not had that. They are barely gaining power, and just wait until when they finally have power and they've had enough time, they're going to show you what crazy actually is.
Well, I think with the idea of them eventually getting to power, and, like, let's say I think it's more likely that a lot of this woke overreach is going to lead to a far right backlash. So if you listen to kind of former neo-Nazis or extremists, a lot of the time they felt like they were outsiders and they were being blamed for other things. And I imagine with some of this CRT stuff, if you're telling little kids that they're oppressors at a very young age, they could eventually get to the point as they become teenagers, they say, I've had enough of this, and they've been told that their white identity is the most important thing about them. If you've been consistently told that that A, you're an oppressor, everything's your fault, and B, your white identity is the most important thing, and you keep that identity, what could then be the logical flip side of that? A white supremacist neo-Nazi group. Mm-hmm. And I think we could potentially get more of those in the future.
Well, it's even more, that could potentially be a problem, because like one of the major things about the woke is that like they're inhibiting genuine social discussions that need to happen for the further betterment of our world. Like we talk a lot about like how we should be focusing on figuring out climate change, about what are we going to do with the third or fourth industrial revolution with AI coming in? We're wasting our time dealing with the kind of bullshit that the woke are putting out. But they've also polarized social justice, that there's only one correct interpretation of it. And we're talking about a lot about feminist issues, but we're not talking about anything that's dealing with men.
Or there's only one correct way to be a person of color.
Yeah, but the what I want to bring up here is the effect it's having on let's say our how do I say this? Our daily interactions in life that really make for a functioning society, like the family structure. And we're not talking about the issues that affect men. We're only talking about women. Understandable to a degree, but nonetheless, this has to be addressed. We're talking about like people who could get sucked into far-right extremist groups as they get older, because they're told that they're oppressors because of their skin color, like you were talking about, Nick. That's made on a magnitude even more likely when we're not talking about men's issues, but the lack of a father in the household, about like how I believe men kill themselves in suicidal rates more than women do. Correct me on that. I'm not sure about that statistic, but like more women are graduating from colleges nowadays than men. Well, that's going to be that's going to deal with a problem. That's going to be a problem in years, because masculinity is now demonized, and that has a potential, if it hasn't already, to destabilize our structures. And when that comes along, when you don't have fathers in the household, doesn't that kind of spur some of these other social issues, like getting young men galvanized to join white supremacist groups? I mean, look what happened to Majid Nawaz back when he was a youngster. Look at what happens to people who got recruited by ISIS, by people who lacked a sense of purpose and identity, and without the steady hand of a parent or a father or a family structure in place. The woke are interfering with conversations we need to move things forward, and that's why they're another threat.
Well, it's interesting what you say about kind of legitimate men's issues, because I think we're actually doing, I don't know about America, but I think we're actually doing a semi-decent job of that here in Australia. There's been a lot more awareness around mental health and suicide prevention, and a necessary part of that conversation is that it particularly affects men. When it comes to actual things like domestic violence, the focus is on women being the victims, and that's the right way to go. But I think maybe a bit. I think the overall focus on mental health is going to be, I think that's a good thing. I think what you're saying, though, about not having good male role models, that's a bit of a problem as well. Because, I was originally studying to be a teacher. I ended up turning my back on society and went into marketing instead. There's been a push in the last decade to get more men into teaching primary school, because that will then give kids a good male role model as they get older. I do think, I think it's valid to say that there's concern about, demonizing masculinity. But if you do, I think the term toxic masculinity, there could be something there. Because if you look at some traditional masculine ideas, they are toxic. Sure. Men can't cry. They have to be strong. They have to dominate women. You know what I mean.
Yeah, my concern with stuff like that.
Sorry.
Oh, let me hear your concern. Let me hear your concern first, Bruce.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that there's no denying that. I'm not, and I'm not. I'm not shitting on women's issues at all, but like,
No,
you know,
no.
as with anything with the woke, what do? They take it too fucking far. So
Yeah.
is all masculinity toxic? Do we just focus on women's issues, or do we focus on the flip side of the equation? It's like how we got involved with the whole conversation regarding Islam. Is there a problem with anti-Muslim bigotry today? Of course, but
We can walk and chew gum.
yeah, like, you know, do you just simply ignore problems in the Islamic community that are substantial and just for the protection of the of Muslim minorities? No, you can't do that. Like, you're sweeping it under the rug, and you can potentially make things worse for everyone in the long run. No, you have to address this issue like anything else, like any other social justice issue, with a fine, nuanced eye. And that's the issue of the woke. It's taking it too bloody far.
That's very Australian. I like that you said bloody. Well, I think what some people I think people need to be defining themselves by what they're for rather than what they're against. Like, I think the problem with people like Dave Rubin and James Lindsay is that they define themselves by what they were against. So the woke left or the regressive left. And they had some legitimate observations about the problems with that. James Lindsay was much more nuanced and intelligent, but as a result, they became so focused on fighting that they then allied with forces that are more toxic, so the right. And I think this also happens on the left as well. Like, so many leftists are so focused on the atrocities that the West has committed that they'll then ally with Islamists. Like, Jeremy Corbyn's done this to a certain extent. Like, he's defended Hamas and the Iranian regime. You know, you can be against Western imperialism and then also be against crazy I'll call them, they're far right as far as I'm concerned, far right regimes. Like, just because, like, I've praised this book before, What's Left by Nick Cohen. He identifies that there's kind of this idea that anyone that's against the West is okay. It doesn't matter if they want to kill homosexuals, if they want to subjugate women. It doesn't matter if they want to persecute other religious minorities. The West is so evil that we'll ally with them. And there has to come a point where you say, no, but you have to keep front of mind what you stood for originally, liberal human rights values. Mm-hmm. And I think that as long as you keep that in forefront, you can oppose the excesses of the left. You can oppose Trump. You can oppose Iran. You can oppose Western imperialism, because you've got all those things are against liberal human rights values.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're 100% right. And my concern with sort of these buzzwords, right, like toxic masculinity or white privilege, is that they do the exact thing that you are concerned about, is that they create an enemy and they show that this is what we are against. So we are against this idea of toxic masculinity. We are against this idea of whiteness and the privilege that it has. And the problem with that is that, largely speaking, masculinity, I think, well, morally, I think is just neutral. I don't really care. But if you are looking at it from the perspective of, well, does it increase the happiness of children, or does it create and foster children that are more likely to actually get an education and less likely to go to prison, whatever it may be, right? The Majid Nawaz argument. If that is the case, then largely speaking, masculinity is a good thing. And there are certainly toxic traits, like the fact that many of them don't feel like they cannot actually express their depression to their peers. So that increases the sort of that they suppress their depressed feelings and they're more likely to commit suicide. I think women have higher rates of depression, but this is an interesting, right? So women tend to have higher rates of depression, self-reported, but that's the thing, right? So it's self-reported, but men tend to kill themselves at a higher rate than women. So it seems like even in these academic polls, men are probably not telling the truth. So if that's the case, then, like, well, masculinity generally is fine. It's not really bad. You could even say it's morally neutral, but you are creating an enemy of that word just by even saying toxic masculinity. Instead of saying toxic masculinity, just say specifically what it is that you mean. Same thing with sort of these other terms like white privilege. I mean, we pretty much have already seen the sort of wild extent to using the term white privilege. I mean, read any book at an anti-racist book sort of promo table at a Target or at a Walmart. Look up when is the term white used in there. It's always derogatorily. And it's very rare, very rarely will you ever read one of those books that say whiteness, it's neutral, it's whatever, it's just sort of they get bad things. You'll never get a nuanced position on it. And so this
Okay,
is
so
sort
we
of the
think-
Jonathan Haidt argument. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. Do you think white privilege is a real thing?
Oh, absolutely. The
Yeah, I
idea
agree.
that yeah, without a doubt. But is it bad enough to the extent that we need to write books about it? That I'm gonna say probably not. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think it happens.
Well,
of course.
I think we need to write books about it, but we need more nuance because, like, I come like I mean, my life's pretty good. I come from a reasonably well-off background. I'm white. I've never really experienced any major bigotry in my life. I have experienced a bit of sexism at work, but that was more just idiocy by management rather than a systemic problem. But if you want to, there's, I know some people that are white and they also live in a housing commission. They're on disability pensions and they have to share community housing with people who have criminal records. Now, you're going to tell them that they're privileged?
Mm-hmm. When you write a book about an issue in society, what you have to think about is by writing this book and by constructing a thing that we perceive to be evil in society, are we going to make it worse? Because people tend to be hypervigilant upon these things. So white people, such as yourself, as you said, without a doubt, sort of get preferential treatment based on the color of their skin. And I'm going to go ahead and throw a bone to the woke side. It's not just people who are legitimately white, but it's also people who also pass as white. So people like Persians. And so that happens. But when you write books about this sort of thing and you construct an entire anti-racist narrative around it, then you make white a bad word. And that's exactly what happened. So yeah, white privilege is an issue. But what we have to consider is, well, is it becoming more of an issue or is it becoming less of an issue? Well, we have data from Google. What do people Google privately in the privacy of their own homes? What are the amount of hate crimes in society? All those things indicate that racism is declining in society. So do we really want to write books about white privilege? Or are we sure that it's not going to make matters worse? I would make the argument that it obviously made things so much worse. Since this thing started becoming popular in 2015, it made things so much worse. We have a moral panic when it comes to race. It's like insane. So
and then we can't, when the problems actually do come up, we can't deal with them.
Yeah,
well, not
and
only
so
that,
like,
you really see how desperate, like how invalid the point is when you start hearing terms like white adjacency, because when you see when you see black people of different cultures, when you see Asians, like Indians, not just Chinese or China-centric peoples succeeding, the only way that this whole white privilege thing works is if you can somehow justify this. If you can somehow justify that minorities are even more successful than people who are white in society, so therefore you come up with this nonsensical term white adjacency, and you try to cram that in. It's like it's an ideology from that point, because the sheer raw empirical data does not fit their narrative. And what does an ideology do? It takes data, objective ideas, objective facts that do not fit their narrative and mangle it around so it does. So you really see that it's a problem. And how many people believe in it.
It just made me think of this Titania. Is this showing?
I'll show it right now. Yeah.
Yeah, this is the fucking funniest tweet I've ever seen in my life.
What is? Oh, it's Titania. Yeah, that's pretty great.
Yeah.
Is this? Where is this from? Hard Work Perspective Authority. The NMAAHC.
Yeah.
What is this? What is that?
Remember they put out that thing about things like hard work and being on time being white values?
This was posted, or at least something very similar was posted to the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this what's the NMAAHC? What is this? The National Museum of African American History and Culture. So this is a museum in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Jesus. Yeah, so stuff like this is becoming more and more popular. And
Like, I mean, have these people ever been to Japan? I trained martial arts there. You'd be late. They beat your shit. They beat your ass with a stick.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to talk about racist cultures, I mean, depending on how you define racism, right? So if you're defining racism based on this idea that you don't like foreigners, Japan is literally that. I mean, try being a white person, try being me in Japan, a Hispanic. They're going to not like you very well. You're going to get bad eyes. Chris Broad, he has a YouTube channel called Abroad in Japan. great guy. He's from Britain and he's living in Japan right now, and he talks about this. And he doesn't talk about it from like a moral standpoint. He doesn't say things like, "Oh, look how racist Japan is." No, he just says like it's interesting because I'm a white guy and I live in Japan, and I get people look at me with the weird side eye, so it's interesting. And some person listening to me can make the argument, well, that's how minorities have to live in the United States for their entire lives, and I would say it's probably not that bad. But I know where you're coming from. I'm Hispanic. I've received those sorts of eyes aimed at myself as well. But for me, I would always say, well, what is the proper response? Is the proper response to launch this entire social justice movement that might make things worse? Or is it for me to just be like, fuck off? Okay, yeah, he's looking at me that way. Statistically, the vast majority of people don't have an issue with me. Statistically, I'm not going to get beaten up in the streets of Los Angeles because of my race. Statistically, that's not going to happen. And statistically, 100 years down the line, this is probably not even going to be that big of an issue anymore, if an issue at all. So we have to be very, very careful with what it is that we prioritize, with what it is that we publicize, because we are bound to make many issues worse because of how bombastic we can be in our language. And that's my argument. Things like toxic masculinity and things like defund the police and things like white privilege, they're bombastic in their language, and they're going to sort of entail this reaction in people who are white, in people who are very pro-police, and people who are against this concept of white privilege. They're going to elicit a very strong reaction in them, and you're going to get things like the far right becoming more and more right. And because the far right now exists, guess what? You're going to have a reaction from people who are on the left saying, you see, we were right all along.
Yeah. Let me throw out Europe. I mean, sorry, I just realized every time I interrupt you guys, that's technically actually violence because I'm white.
Yeah, it is.
Sorry, you
go ahead. Nick, you have my permission. You have my permission. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Please forgive me. Yeah, but I mean, look at Europe. When they had the migrant crisis in 2015, the far right they were having France had masses and masses of terror attacks. The far right just surged in popularity. It was really quite alarming. You had the Alternative for Deutschland, you had Marine Le Pen, you had Geert Wilders has been around for a while. Have you guys seen Geert Wilders before?
I've heard of him.
I swear to God, I can't be the only person that thinks it's this. He looks like a Bond villain. Hang on, oops.
If you want to talk about a Bond villain, you have Vladimir Putin, who's like a black belt in judo, and just built like a tank. That if you need an example of a real
I know this guy.
Villain,
doesn't he look like a Bond villain?
Oh my God,
yeah, he does. This guy's super anti-Islam.
He's an anti-Muslim bigot. Yeah, it's I expect me to do. No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Yeah, this guy's crazy.
Yeah, he's a nasty piece of work.
Mm-hmm. And part of the fuel that he gets is from people who are unwilling to legitimately talk about those issues. Yeah. For willing to legitimately platform people like Ayaan Hirsi Ali. I read her book and I fact-checked everything that she said. I looked at her end notes because that is a huge issue and I do not want to be wrong about that.
This is that's a problem.
One. Yeah, so I can read that book and I fact-checked it and I can be confident in saying Ayaan Hirsi Ali is largely correct about this issue. And the fact that so many people in Europe are unwilling to have that conversation, you're going to have people like that Geert Wilders guy become more and more popular. Not only that, isn't he a member of parliament?
Yeah, music guy just said he looks like an evil Bill Clinton.
Yeah, he looks. I mean, he looks like Bill Clinton. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, so that's you're gonna get people like that in power. It's the same. Steven Pinker made this argument when he talked about race and IQ and about these really. Now, I want to make it perfectly clear.
I'm shutting up on this one.
From my personal research, I would say that the differences in IQ is due to sociological reasons, not genetics. That's my opinion. I've read The Bell Curve by Charles Murray. I haven't read his most recent book, but I've listened to the talks that John McWhorter and Glenn Lowry had about his book. I'm convinced that this is due to socialization. This is due to...
Can I throw one thing out? I imagine this. I'm not a scientist. I talk a lot of bullshit. But I would imagine if you're poor and you don't have access to good nutrition and food from a young age, could that maybe affect one's development?
That's one of the issues. Yeah,
I think that's part of it. But Thomas Sowell raises this issue in one of his books, Discrimination and Disparities, that if you're the firstborn in a family with multiple children, then as long as you're in a position to get more care from your parents, more personal attention, and especially if you come up in a household that does white collar work, you're more likely to be more exposed to more sophisticated concepts and words at an earlier age, and that's
look at me. I joined the Flat Earth Society.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
probably have an higher IQ quotient than your other siblings. So I would have to say that not knowing so much about this issue as I would like to. I think
Right.
I think you're correct, Vince. Yeah, there probably are a lot more sociological factors that go into it.
Yeah, but even then, right? Let's say someone says, "Oh, you're just taking the safe side because you don't want to get canceled on the internet," whatever it may be. Either way, that's not even necessary for my argument, because we can see what's going on with that debate. You have so many people unwilling to even engage in that conversation, and so just the TLDR of that is that if you look at the average IQs among the races, they differ. They differ pretty significantly, and that's a huge issue. That's a huge moral concern for a lot of people. And so a lot of people don't even want to touch it. And what Steven Pinker, the cognitive psychologist at Harvard, very famous, what he argued is that because people on the left, people in general, are so unwilling to engage in that conversation, they're letting the far right, they're letting these crazy right-wingers get the fact that there are differences in average IQ among the races and come to ridiculous racist conclusions because of it. Now
Didn't the
you
Nazis like leverage Darwinism or something?
leverage
That's
Darwinism,
Well, they
Did that?
they really perverted Darwinism or something to
like
kind
social
of
Darwinism.
No, like the idea that Darwinian's theory or something that they use that to justify that whites are more superior to other races. I don't know. I just heard that.
They
It sounds
bastardize
like something
the
they
ideas
do.
along with other races. Yes.
Yeah, Asians and Jewish people are their favorite people, but you're getting these crazy people who are coming to those conclusions because of that, and that's why. And again, that's why what he argues is like, it doesn't matter how controversial, how uncomfortable a topic may be, we have to be able to address it. Because if we don't address it and we don't apply the proper nuance that is required for that topic, you're going to get these crazy people. You're going to get these crazy people who say that we should give economic incentives to minorities to leave the country, that we should create an ethno-state. Just look at Norway. Well, what's the thing that Laura Chen said? Like, why is it that Norway, this sort of this country with a high level of socialization, is that why there's so much? Is that why they have like better rates of healthcare survival? Is that why they have better average well-being? No, it's not because of that. Just look at their average IQs. She'll say shit like that, and so but she's saying stuff like that, and people around that camp are saying those sorts of things because people such as ourselves are unwilling to engage in that conversation. I'm unwilling to engage in that conversation. I promise you, I'm not going to say much about this topic after this podcast.
All three of us are fucked after this.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason I'm saying this is because I'm just sort of addressing it surface level. I'm not going deep into it. And to the extent that we're having a 10-minute conversation about this, that's as far as it goes. But there are people out there who are public intellectuals who talk for hours about things, who refuse to touch that. They'll make fun of the people saying these sorts of things, and they'll say, oh, you guys are just racist, but they won't actually address it. They won't actually address the actual statistic. And so that's the issue. And Steven Pinker is spot on when he says, you guys are letting these crazy people get these conclusions and get these like facts and reach terrible conclusions. And they're recruiting people because you're too
David
scared.
Pakman actually did a pretty good deep dive on this topic about 4 years ago. He actually addressed the issue of race and IQ, and he basically said it was, what you were saying, it's around socialization. He did also kind of take issue with was it the Heritage Foundation or another? Well, it was another organization that did the original studies, but his was actually quite nuanced.
David Pakman actually has some pretty good takedowns of stuff. I remember he made a video about the woke left a few, I want to say 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And so, and he said, well, it is an issue. He probably changed his tune now because he never talks about it. I don't know if that's because he doesn't.
I listen to his show at least once a week, and he does. I think he stands by everything he said about it. He's just he doesn't his criticisms of it stand, but he doesn't think he doesn't think it's worth a lot of time.
Mm-hmm. I don't mind.
That's one of the areas I think I have to disagree with David Pakman on so far. I mean, I've drifted away from his work, Nick. In general, I used to like him, but right now, I think he's a little bit too I think he favors the left too much
Yeah,
in that regard.
I
But
can see
you know, but to take a spin on this, what do you guys think of Steven Pinker's overall thesis that in general the world has been getting better and has the potential to go that way? Do you still feel that way with everything that's gone on with COVID, with how easily we split into tribes, with critical race theory, with the rise in unreason, with the willingness of people to believe in postmodernism? Do you still believe in Pinker's overall theory, and is it still holding?
Well, that very quickly, I've argued for this and I've defended Pinker on a lot of issues, on this one in particular, because in the most respectful manner possible, that's not his thesis. And he's
Sure.
he's had to reiterate this when a lot of people. I think Eric Weinstein argued against him about this. I think not Joe Rogan. Who was it? David Pakman, I think, to some extent, argued against this as well. And he said, "Oh no, sorry. It was the guys from The Hill who used to be on The Hill, and now they have their own podcast.
Is that
Crystal
Crystal
Cigar
and-
and Crystal and Cigar? Yeah." So he said, "My thesis or my argument is not that the world is getting better, therefore it's going to continue to get better. It's not even that the world is like that we are living in like better times now than has ever been in history, so therefore we can be confident about the future." His argument was this, and this is what he says when he responds to criticisms of his work. My argument is that, largely speaking, society, yes, has been getting better. And it is, yes, better now than it has been in the past when you look at child mortality rates, when you look at average GDP levels, when you look at just about every metric that you can think of, we tend to be better now. That does not mean that it's going to be better 10 years down the line. What that means is that society has problems, and these problems have solutions, as we've shown. And we can come to these solutions if we think about it rationally. So, he'll admit some issues we haven't gotten better on. We have not gotten better on climate change. We've gotten worse on climate change. So what he'll respond to is saying, yes, climate change is bad. I think he would even go so far as to say income inequality is bad. I don't think he takes a sort of Yaron Brooks view of that. But he'll say these are genuine issues. They're issues, but we've had worse issues in the past, and we've overcome them. And so we have to recognize that we have problems, and we need to come up with solutions for them, and we have to be realistic. So what he's mainly arguing against in Enlightenment Now is this very MSM news media cycle narrative that society's never been worse off. So he constantly attacks academics, or not attacks, but he addresses academics. So if you were to, and so he links towards this Hans Rosling sort of experiment that was conducted, where if you go to a TED Talk and you give them a test, basically like a 3-answer test, saying what is the average child mortality rate now? Is it 10%? Is it 5%? Is it 15%? What is the percentage of women globally who are educated? Is it 60%? Is it 80%? Is it 20%? Highly educated people. Ask these people that. Now, if you were to give these exams to a chimp, just based on just randomness, based on probability, they would get 33% of it correct, right? Just because it's random, it's just 3 possible answers. Academics, on average, get around 17% of the questions correct. And again, these aren't based on perception.
17 or 70?
17%. So they're terribly wrong. And again, these aren't like perceptual questions, right? It's not like someone could argue against the fact that the global amount of women who are educated is around 80%. That's not a perception issue. That's just a basic fact. And so what he says is that, well, like, this is in the upper echelons of the academy. This is what's being perpetuated in the mainstream media, right? If you turn on the news cycle, they're going to usually be talking about bad stuff that occurred, because if it bleeds, it leads. Bad news tends to sell much more. So he says, we need to keep our heads on straight. There's serious issues in the problem. There's serious issues in the world, and we are not going to solve them by having this very pessimistic, negative, and unrealistic view of society. We have to be realistic about it. Realistically speaking, society is better now than it ever was in the past. Realistically speaking, it is better to be a minority now, living now, than it is in the 1960s. We have to be honest.
It's better in the West than it is pretty much anywhere else.
Yes, it is better in the West than it is in sub-Saharan Africa. Realistically, that's the case. That's not to say that means society will be better off 10 years in the future. What that means
is that we settle.
Or that we settle, yeah. What that means is that we have problems, and we've done a pretty good job at addressing those problems so far, and we have to keep we have to keep doing that by keeping a level head. Let's not lose sight of what is reality. That's his argument, and he's stressed this because so many people have argued against him. Like Eric Weinstein, I think he uses the argument of polarization and what's going on in the political world and what's going on with the rise of fascism in Western Europe as an argument against him. But he'll say, like, that's not my argument. So that's why I always have to like give that sort of defends Pinker. Pinker's a male bulldog because his female bulldog is, I think, Selenium on Twitter.
I'll have to retract my previous statement. I'm a huge fan of Steven Pinker's work, but obviously I didn't understand his thesis. So yeah, very well said, Vince.
Can I ask, obviously we've got these legitimate problems that the woke point out. So if the woke isn't the solution, what is the solution? There's and I'll throw this out. Unlearning Race by Thomas Chatterton Williams. That seems to me to be a very level-headed, productive, and honest acknowledgement of legitimate racial problems that have existed in the past and continue to exist now, while also acknowledging progress and mapping out. I don't think we can say we have a colorblind society even in the West, but I think he maps out a potential path to where we could one day get there. What do you guys think of that?
Okay, so the deal is, all right, you're talking about the woke, quote unquote, bringing up legitimate social justice issues, but I find that they're also blowing a lot of them way out of proportion. And I think one of the major solutions, or one of the major steps to them is, okay, how do I say this without sounding hackneyed? People have to learn how to reason again. I'll give you an example of what I mean. If you about a month ago on Clubhouse, there's a room that opened up about, and this one gentleman was raising a question about how do we teach people how to improve their argument. I was on stage and I asked the gentleman who started the stage, I think you're asking the wrong question. Here's the one I think we should be asking. Do you even know what an argument is? Do you even know what critical thinking is? Do you understand that arguing your point through a sheer emotional basis and realizing you have nothing to back it up with is not a valid argument? Are you familiar with logic in any way, shape, or form? Okay, if you're not, then that's the problem. What we see here, let's take last year's riots, for example. We bring up the Roland Fryer studies, statistics from the FBI, from the Department of Justice about the number of shootings against Black people. They were not as substantial as as everyone freaked out about to be. We get police shootings that happen even to white people, to whites, and they're not. The police are not going out there indiscriminately shooting Black people. They're not. Okay. So, but why can't we talk about this? Yes, and I'm not denying I'm not denying that I'm not denying racism. I'm not denying it's out there. I'm not denying there are issues in the Black community or in any other racial community. But we have to come up with frank discussions about of what are the problems actually are without fear of political correctness. And for that, people have to learn how to reason. All right, you have to. You can't be afraid of saying this or that because of political narrative, and you can't have your moral character or your intent impugned at the very outset, which the woke and their equivalents on the right are just completely guilty of. We know that humans, to quote to reference Jonathan Haidt's work, are led more by their elephant rather than their rider. They're driven more by their emotions than they are by reason. And one of the most important things I argue that we could ever do to deal with the quote unquote issues that the woke bring up, and there are legitimate issues, I'm not doubting that, is that you have to learn how to apply reason again. That's the genesis behind what I believe Vince stated about those are the underlying factors between Steven Pinker's argument about how to create a better world, how to keep a level head, how to come to a solution. You cannot do that without admitting that there's a problem and coming up with the actual empirical data to create an argument that addresses that issue and therefore come up with a solution. If you don't have that, if you go all Wokistani or you fall into just nationalistic narratives, then you're fucked. So the most important thing you can do to solve the issues that are either overblown or brought up on a legitimate basis by the woke is to fall back on building that base of reason, which from where I'm standing is weak at the moment.
Well, it's like there's a lot of. It does seem like there's a lot of this stuff. Like I'm waiting for the Emperor's Got No Clothes moment with some of this woke stuff, because a lot of it doesn't hold up to deep scrutiny, and they have to. Like, I mean, Robin DiAngelo, she refused to debate Ayaan Hirsi Ali. Like, to me, that's if you're a white woman who's made made their career around fighting racism, and then you've got a black one of the greatest black intellectuals of our time, saying, I don't agree with you on your views on race, I want to debate you, you should be jumping at that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if, because like I think, Vince, you might be a little bit more knowledgeable on this, but like, isn't in some of the more crazy woke areas, like critical thinking is actually viewed as a form of white supremacy or something?
The concept of a contradiction is viewed as a form of white supremacy. So if you have two people of color who say things that contradict each other, and let's say they're both wokey, and you have an anti-woke person addressing that, saying, well, those two guys contradict each other, isn't that an issue? They'll say, you're dealing with epistemic violence right there. That's the idea that they are contradicting each other is an idea that is rooted in your contemporary understanding of epistemology, which is white philosophy. They'll say this stuff. Read Me and White Supremacy by Layla Saad. Read these books. It's crazy stuff. And again, I wouldn't be talking about it that much if these were just crazy esoteric philosophy papers that were being published by some of the lower level universities. These are on promo tables at Target. These are books, Amazon bestsellers that are getting this amount of attention. It is crazy, and it's becoming more and more popular.
And people believe it.
It's so
what
like,
about
believe it.
What about then? Can bring it back. Have you guys read Chatterton Williams' book?
Yes,
Yeah.
both of them.
Great.
Yeah.
I only read his most recent one.
So, like, do you think that's a more productive way of addressing these issues?
Oh, without
Thomas,
a doubt. Yeah.
Thomas brings such a level of nuance to all of this. I mean, I've said this before. Black doesn't mean black. Asian doesn't mean Asian. White doesn't mean white. There's so much. There's so much cultural diversity under a certain skin under people who have like a certain kind of appearance, certain kind of skin color. Like, I think Thomas has, he was talking about some of his girlfriends that he's met in his second book, and how he met someone who came from, who has a black heritage, but she doesn't. I don't think she ever considered herself black. She considered herself as coming from another culture. I mean, if we take Ayaan Hirsi Ali, for example, she's from Somalia. And I believe in a previous podcast with Sam Harris, she didn't identify as black. I think I'm not sure what she identifies as, but I think maybe a Somali. I don't know about that, but
and there's also a lot of hatred amongst some of these groups in Africa. Like, people forget that.
Yeah, but like you also have someone like Camille Foster who doesn't like to think of himself as black because he doesn't want to be confined because of his racial confined to the structure, the imposed structures and demanded by other people. He doesn't want to think of himself that way because your identity is much more than what you look like. I mean, okay, so I'm Asian. But my experiences will be different than someone who just stepped off the boat from China or someone who's living in China. I was born in America. I have a very, very different a cultural background. So am I Asian? Yeah, but where do I belong in the overall umbrella? So it's very, very culturally diverse. And like, again, as in anything in life with culture, with genes and memes, there's a great deal of complexity to that. And like, again, with the woke, they just way oversimplify it to a point of absurdity.
And it's kind of like you've got somebody like Candace Owens and then somebody like Ibram Kendi. It's like they've both got, well, I don't know, like they're both black, but then it's like, well, which one of them gets to say that they have the authentic black experience?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
well, the who the hell are you to say that? Not you, Nick, but who the hell is anyone to say that they speak for an entire community? Imagine the kind of
they're the authentic person,
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Imagine the level of colossal arrogance you would need to have in order to say that.
Yeah.
Imagine that. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I say, I bring up that example of somebody who's dunked on Candace Owens quite a bit on Twitter. I think she's a clown.
Yeah, and like it reminds me of just people being able to capture the narrative. So when people on the Ibram Kendi side or the Layla Sad side, when they say, "Well, we are expressing the authentic Black voice," and anybody like people like Candace Owens, they'll say they're white adjacent. They'll say that they are still adopting by the tenets of white supremacy or whatever it may be. They're the authentic Black voice. That's just, to me, that comes across, that's just a tactic that you are using that is effective. It reminds me of the Latinx thing, where you have 99% of people being pulled, of Hispanics, of Latin people being pulled, saying they don't like the term Latinx. Stop using that. And then
Well,
they
they don't
keep
even know what it
using
is.
it. They don't even know what, well, I mean, yeah, because I think like the president of, I forget who it was, but like someone in Spain who is in charge of like every dictionary in Spain or whatever it may be, he came out and said like the reason why we don't use Latinx is not because we don't like being inclusive. It's because it makes no grammatical sense. You guys are using English tiered rules on a Spanish system, and it doesn't make sense to us. It's just wrong. And so, but they don't
Very
care. No,
colonialist.
yeah, very colonialist. They said no, we don't care. We care what our sociology professor tells us, and so they keep doing it, even though most people don't agree with it. And I often wonder, there's no poll on what like the Black community in on large like thinks about people like Ibram Kendi or Robin DiAngelo, so we don't really know what they say. All we have to go by is these books, and what I prefer, the arguments and the veracity of the arguments. So when you ask the question, well, what is an alternative to white fragility? What is an alternative to how to be an anti-racist? My favorite book on race relations is probably Authentically Black by John McWhorter. I really like The Content of Our Character by Shelby Steele. That resonates with me. Now, again, I'm not Black, so I can't speak about their experience. And I'm Hispanic, so if I were to have any racial issues that were directed towards me, I mean, it would only be a blip on my radar as compared to what somebody else who is Black would feel. But that resonates me much more as a person of color than what I am being told by someone like Ta-Nehisi Coates, or not even that, what I am being told by a woke Chicanx professor at my university when he's telling me that I should be scared of the white man. I should be scared of him. I should feel angry. I should feel justified in violent retaliation against these people. I don't feel that way. And even if it is justified, is that really the route that we want to go down? I don't think we should live in a moral society based on what is justified. I'm a utilitarian. I care about increasing the well-being of society and decreasing harm. And if that means not caring about what is justified, because again, all justified is just satisfying our primal urges. Well, you deserve this. I'm
well,
not
and also like
focused
if I might, like, I mean, when you were saying that you should be scared of the white man, you should have resentment towards them. Okay, well, let's then apply that to this. How should a gay Pakistani feel towards other group people? Towards like other Pakistanis who are not going to be very tolerant of his. Should he then apply that same attitude? I don't think people would go for that.
It's this war mentality, this civil war mentality that people want to adopt on society that is only serving to divide us. I always go back to what Jonathan Haidt says. Instead of focusing on the things that we hate, that we collectively hate, the other, let's focus on the things that we all agree on. It's this us versus them mentality that we need to get rid of. We need to stop creating these boogeymen that don't actually exist. Because, as I said, this is why I try not to be so antagonistic to people whom I think I disagree with largely, like Vash, right? Like David Pakman. Because if I were to write down all the things that I agree with them on versus all the things that I disagree with them on, I'd be surprised to see just on how much we agree. We probably agree on the vast majority of issues, but it's just those small, it's the narcissism of differences that will really get us as a society. And that's what polarizes us more. And so that's why when I read books like these anti-racist books, they focus on the bad things. They focus on the things that divide us, and they create this enemy, and they create this moral system in which we should feel outraged about these sorts of things. And the only way to alleviate these issues is by consistently being outraged. I'll read that and I'll say, I don't really like that. And then I'll read a book like Authentically Black. I'll read a book like The Content of Our Character, like Unlearning Race. Those books actually focus on our common humanity. And they recognize, John McWhorter recognizes this. Look, yes, there are systemic issues when it comes to issues revolving around race, but we need to be careful about how we deal with those issues. And we also need to make sure that the solution, to quote famous philosopher Donald Trump, is not worse than the actual problem. So we have to be careful with those sorts of things. And so it really disappoints me when I see that the books that are being promoted, that are being forced down the throats of every Target shopper, is a book like, oh, her new book. We should stop promoting White Fragility. She has a new book out called Nice Racism. Now a book that promotes
How
white
ironic.
racism. Yeah, it's how ironic, right? We're promoting those books, and we're not promoting books like Authentically Black. We're not promoting those books. No.
Or
Those
like
books
you
are
should be
disgusting.
saying, like, read that book and then also read Authentically Black if you want a real
Oh yeah,
diversity of opinion.
yeah. And I
Yeah.
promise you, 9 times out of 10, a person will prefer Authentically Black over Nice Racism. Because Nice Racism, I read the first 5 pages so far. It's already, I don't think I'm even going to read it. I don't know why I would do that to myself. I read White Fragility twice, and I hated every second of it. I already know what Nice Racism is going to be like.
I'll go on a little tangent here. I actually subjected myself to one of Joe Rogan's podcasts, the full 4 hours he had with Alex Jones. I'm pretty sure it gave me brain damage.
No kidding. How did that? Yeah.
You guys haven't read any of Thomas Sowell's work yet, have you?
No, I haven't. No.
Yeah, I would seriously recommend that. I think Thomas Chatterson Williams had only recently started going into his work earlier this year, and I think he was fairly impressed by it. I mean, I've read some of Thomas Sowell's work, in Discrimination and Disparities, on Black rednecks and white liberals, and started getting into some of his other books, and the quality of the writing and the sheer amount of data that he brings to the table is certainly impressive. I think, like, in addition to like Thomas Chatterson Williams' books, like Sowell's work is, I'll make the mandatory reading.
Wouldn't we love to see though? Like, wouldn't it be great to have Ibram Kendi sit down with Thomas Sowell?
Ibram Kendi does not deserve to be on the same stage as Thomas Sowell.
Well, you know what I mean, though.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. If Michel Foucault in the 80s was able to sit down and have a conversation with Noam Chomsky, and this is an argument against moral relativism. Noam Chomsky was arguing against moral relativism. Foucault was arguing for it. If those two people who have completely diametrically opposed views of what it means to live in a moral society can sit down and have a conversation with each other, you should expect these people to talk with each other. Let us not forget that John McWhorter did actually sit down and have a conversation with Ta-Nehisi Coates. It happened once. And they talked about hip hop largely, because I guess that's a big issue within the Black community. I just listen to music that sounds good, but I guess that's an issue for them. And so they sat down and they had that conversation. Why can Robin DiAngelo not sit down and have a conversation with Coleman Hughes, who requested her? Why can she not sit down and not even have a vocal conversation, but a written conversation with Ayana Hirsi Ali, whom she tried to petition that? And that it comes across because I think she's a grifter. I think she's more in it for the money. I think the fact that she gets paid, $20,000 for an online speech during the pandemic, a 30-minute speech. I'm sorry. The likelihood that she's a grifter is higher than the likelihood that she's actually doing this because she's doing some positive social change. That's what it comes
Kendi?
down to.
Do you reckon Kendi actually believes this stuff, or would you put him in the same category as DiAngelo?
I think Kendi... I think Kendi is more likely to actually legitimately believe this stuff.
It comes across as more sincere.
Yeah, I don't know what he's actually doing with it, because he has a huge anti-racist foundation that Jack Dorsey gave like $1 million to shortly after the George Floyd issue.
10 million,
but tell me, like, Jesus. But Coleman Hughes also requested to debate, or not even debate. Again, Coleman Hughes is not a debater. He's a soft-spoken, intellectual person that you'd like to have a conversation with. He doesn't debate people whom he has on. Listen to his podcast with Ezra Klein. He's a sincere person to talk with.
He had fucking Noam Chomsky on.
He had Noam Chomsky on. He had Ezra Klein on. He had David Hogg on. He has people whom he disagrees with on, and he's nice and cordial with them. I mean, if Tim Pool could do it, come on, Kendi, you can do it. If Tim Pool can have Vash on, you can do it, Kendi.
I don't believe that.
Tim Pool thinks Australia's turned into a concentration camp.
What were you saying, Bruce?
I don't believe either of those two clowns are sincere because of all the reasons you stated, Vince, and also because, like, there's another friend of mine who I'd like to have on eventually. this one friend of mine told me this one story that I'll try to get right. He challenged Kendi in an online meeting, asked him a direct question about how gender differences in like STEM and some other fields, why were they much more pronounced in some societies that aren't as egalitarian as, say, a more modern liberal society. And the reasons for such a state are explored in some other podcasts. I can't bring them to mind at the moment. But like Kenny's response was, I wouldn't trust such a racist study to begin with. It's obviously just tainted. It made that assertion right from the outset and didn't go into any of the reasons why or whatever. And it's like, so his defense was pretty much an ad hominem attack, which if you study any kind of logic, that's a logical fallacy right there, and he pretty much just invalidated his own argument. So I don't believe that Kendi or D'Angelo are sincere in any way, shape, or form. They're just taking advantage of the current social atmosphere, which is which is antithetical to the causes they claim to care for.
By the way, I do want to address this real quickly. Because I feel like neither of you guys have addressed it, and I'm really disappointed in you guys. Aporia is saying, a nice beard, Vince. Thank you. I've been growing it out for a couple of months now. Hopefully it's going to look almost as good as Noam Chomsky's does right now. And then he also says, "Wowie."
Well, I was worried that if I
guys, I'll be right back.
I was worried if I commented on your facial hair, then that might be viewed as a microaggression.
If you said that I'm well-spoken, it certainly would. If you ask me where I'm from, it certainly would. That's interesting to me, by the way. If you ask a person where they're from, that's considered a microaggression. That's interesting, because I guess you would assume their socioeconomic status or based on where they're from. Which
like, I reckon, like, maybe if you ask someone based on their appearance, I could see how that's a bit like not cool. But if somebody's got a really obvious like German accent or something, then you might ask, "Hey, where are you from?" Because you're showing an interest in who they are.
I don't know. I just think based on things that looks more like a goatee. Oh no, I don't want to go for the goat. So my plan is to keep it growing, because clearly there's places where it grows at a much slower rate than my chin. So my hope is that it's going to keep growing, and then I'll even it out, and I'll have a consistent sort of 5 o'clock homeless shadow sort of thing going on. That's what I'm going for, the homeless look.
I saw a great one time. There was a homeless guy. He had a sign said, "Family kidnapped by ninjas need money for kung fu lessons."
Oh, those signs are interesting. Yeah, huge homeless issue here in LA. So
yeah,
I won't be moving to LA anytime soon. Not because of the homeless issue. I actually hate LA. So when people visit California, like family members, they'll say, oh, "Can I go? Let's go to Hollywood." You can go. I hate Hollywood. The parking there is atrocious. It smells like weed all the time. Not that I have an issue against it. I partake in myself as well, but it's not my atmosphere. It's not my I just don't like it. I like New York. New York City is great. I'll go to New York City 10 times out of 10. It's a pristine version of LA. But yeah, so hopefully it comes out.
Have any of you guys been to Tokyo?
No, I haven't been to an Asian country yet. I've been all over Europe. I've been all over Latin America. I've been to Canada. I haven't been to any country in Asia. I actually want to visit a country like Iran. I want to visit a dangerous country just because okay, Afghanistan is
you can have
really a dangerous country. Yeah. But the reason why I want to do that
come to Australia, every animal's trying to kill us.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have the C word privilege that you guys have, so I don't think I'd be able to say properly, like, address those animals. I remember you shared a meme that made me laugh. It was like what people think Australia is like, and it's from episode 2. Yeah, so that one was pretty funny.
Do you care if I share something that has the C bomb in it?
No, go for it. I think we've already said the word COVID and ivermectin, so this isn't going to go anywhere.
You know how some people in Australia, some people in Australia, they complain that immigrants don't integrate. Well, I was over at Sydney Uni a few years ago, and there was this Chinese kid, and he clearly hadn't been in the country for very long. Called his friend a fucking shit cunt.
No shit.
So I'm like, clearly the system's working very well.
Yeah, I also want to visit Australia. Actually, I want to go to Sydney. I'll visit you.
Yeah, Sydney, mate. Yeah. Hang on, I think I found the meme.
Now, trigger warning for anyone who actually likes Star Wars. We're going to share a still from the prequels, Episode 2. One of the actually no, I would say Episode 2 is the best of the prequels. I think
Oh, no, come on,
Episode
Revenge of
1
the
is the worst
Sith.
one. Oh, Revenge of the Sith. You're right. What am I saying? Yeah, here we go. This is the meme that you shared.
People think it's better, like what it's actually like.
Dude, how many people on average actually believe drop bears are a real thing over there?
It's only ever tourists when they arrive.
Like tourists? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a trick we play on them.
I'm amazed that people fall for it.
I'll tell you what, like, we brought up Star Wars. I still maintain I've made the most controversial statement on your podcast ever.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I don't understand why you're not canceled yet. You think that I already forgot its name. That's how forgettable.
The Last Jedi.
The Last Jedi is actually a good movie. Now I'll say it's better than The Rise of Skywalker, but it's still a bad movie.
It's the best Star Wars film since Empire Strikes Back.
You really liked the fact that it was a completely meaningless mission that could have just been ended if that lady, Laura Dern's character, was honest about what the mission was and didn't have to cause this whole mutiny with Oscar Isaac's character. I can't even remember the characters' names.
Well, what I liked about it was that it took these really bold, lavish characters and it just broke them. And I thought it was a really interesting character study.
Did you like also when they went to that casino planet for no other reason than just to say that the farming animals is bad? that animal mistreatment is bad?
Yeah, like, I mean, they did make a good point with like how those people that were selling X-Wings and TIE fighters or something.
Yeah. My main issue with it was that, look, I respected that there was a different vision there from the Abrams vision. I respected that there was a vision there. I get that, but here's the issue. Oh, is it Poe? Yeah, Poe. Here's the issue. When you start a trilogy, and you already tell yourself we're going to make 3 movies, you have to know what's going to happen. You have to know what's going to be the conclusion. You can't just go in sort of with a blindfold on saying, oh, this looks cool in this movie, and let's just hope the next guy who directs the next movie is going to be able to handle it properly. Because what happened was that you had the second director, what was his name?
Rian Johnson.
Rian Johnson. You had Rian Johnson, who saw what J.J. Abrams was intending to do, didn't care, threw it away, saying, I'm going to make my own thing. Okay, cool. You disagree with Abrams. Find another director then, because this has to be consistent. It was too obvious from a filmmaking standpoint that Rian Johnson just didn't like the direction that Abrams was taking, so he did a complete 180. Oh, complete or 90, whatever. That was too obvious. So it didn't feel like a coherent, consistent movie, a coherent chronology of events. It felt like 2 competing different visions of.
I think, like saying that the trilogy doesn't fit together as a cohesive trilogy. I think that's fair. I think that's like I actually think the prequels do that better.
Yeah, at least the prequels, it felt consistent. It was a bad.
Revenge of the Sith is good, but the other 2 are.
Yeah, I actually like Revenge of the Sith. I thought it was fine. Cringy dialogue, but I mean, we're used to that already with Star Wars. But with, and focusing on it just on a movie individually as a movie, there was just too many things that didn't make any. It felt like it was just one scene after another scene after another. It was just a collection of scenes that didn't flow together very well. Again, the whole Laura Dern fiasco, it felt like they just forced that in because they wanted the whole believe women sort of aspect to it, which I think is fine. That doesn't matter to me. That's fine, but make it make sense. It didn't make sense because the issue that the audience was left in their heads was, well, why were we against Laura Dern's character? It wasn't because she was a woman. It was because, dude, you were going to kill them all. Like, if you just tell them the plan, just tell Poe's character or Poe the plan so he wouldn't have to create a mutiny. And there's the reason why people sort of kind of raised their eyebrows and kind of laughed at the idea that chick who, God bless her, she was made fun of way too much on Twitter and on Instagram. She did not deserve any. Yeah, she did not deserve any of the abuse that she got. Discussing, screw those people who gave her abuse.
That was terrible.
I'm just focusing on the movie. Yeah, terrible abuse. She did not deserve any of that abuse. But on the movie, it made no sense why there was a romance between her and Finn. No one was expecting that.
I'll actually say her character I could take or leave. Like, I don't think she's amazing, but I don't think she was great either. And I don't think she's amazing, but I don't think she was terrible either. You get the idea.
I remember, but I will say The Rise of Skywalker is worse. I remember watching that movie, and when Rey kissed Kylo Ren, I'm like, they just stopped caring. They're just giving fan service. They don't care about this trilogy anymore. It's ridiculous.
Have either of you played The Last of Us Part 2?
Yes, I beat it.
What do you think of it?
I didn't like it.
Dark game. Dark.
Yeah, well, you know how some games they have warnings about, like, you know, if you have like photosensitivity issues or something like that. I think that game should have had a similar warning for people with anxiety and depression.
Yeah, that game's depressing. Jesus.
But some of the criticism, like I have my own problems with that game. I thought it was way too long, and I think narratively it didn't make sense. But some of the stuff, like I thought the LGBT inclusion was actually very good and well handled in that, and people were just annoyed that it was in there to begin with.
Yeah, it was fine. That wasn't my issue with it. I get why. I will say a lot of people are throwing dishonest arguments out there, like saying they're just anti, like, you know, gay marriage or whatever like that. They're just these gamer bros. No, like, look, understand the broader context. The gaming industry is so hardcore, overwhelmingly woke. So when they see that stuff represented, they're not seeing, oh, they're just representing, they're not just representing the LGBT community. They're seeing it's, again, the woke gaming industry. And again, the gaming industry is insanely woke. I've never seen a more woke group of people than the gaming industry. Colin Moriarty, who for the longest time was labeled as pretty much the only conservative in gaming journalism. And this is not, he left the Republican Party because of Trump. He donates money to Planned Parenthood. He supported abortion well before Obama supported abortion. He supports prostitution because he just thinks, like, let people do whatever they want. Like, he's pretty much a social libertarian. He is like a pretty hardcore socially, like, do whatever you want person. And he's very, like, he's the most boring conservative you'll ever meet on the face of this planet. It doesn't matter. He was completely ostracized from the gaming community, called a white supremacist, called a Nazi, even though he donates money to Planned Parenthood. He left the Republican Party because of Trump. He did not vote for Trump. He thinks Trump is disgusting. He's an atheist. He's not even religious. So it doesn't matter. The gaming community kicked him out because that's all it takes. Like, that's literally all it takes. So I get it. And that's why I have to remind people when they, like, hear stories like this about The Last of Us who don't play video games. If you're invested in the gaming community, like I am, I read IGN, I read Push Square, I read Kotaku, I read all these places. They're super duper woke, like super fucking woke. So,
but like, sorry, yeah.
No, that's just gonna say. So, like, when gamers TM play a game like The Last of Us and they see that stuff in their minds because they're so invested in these communities, they don't see just like, oh, it's just people wanting to represent, lesbians. They don't see that. They see, no, it's like this woke corporation fighting against us. Like, that's what they see. And I understand why they see that, because games journalism is super fucking woke, hardcore. Like, read Jason Schreier.
Like, I didn't think the game was that woke though. Like, I thought that it was, it just had, here's a gay couple. But the instances that they show early in the game of the bigotry they face, like, I mean, that still happens. And that's still a legitimate issue. And I think it is. I think it is good to have, more, like, it's become a dirty word, but more diverse characters. Because, like, I mean, you can imagine somebody who's gay or a minority, they might grow up seeing white superheroes on TV all the time. They may one day think, well, where do I fit into all this? So I think it is good to have, and also in the game itself, the idea and the characters were really good.
Yeah, I didn't really care. That was not my argument against the game. I think the game is just not good. But from that perspective, from the representation perspective, that one's always been interesting to me, because on a personal scale, I don't really care that much if I'm being represented. I really don't care if there's a Mexican guy who is the main protagonist of a AAA Naughty Dog game. I'm not gonna care. I'm not even gonna. The only reason why I would think about it is because these websites are telling me that it's a big deal. Same thing if there's like a short guy I'm pretty short, so if there's a short guy representing.
Oh, my neighbor left a note on my car calling me short.
Aren't you like 5'10" though? You're
5'9".
All right, well, yeah, okay, you're your average height.
Yeah,
I personally wouldn't care. Yeah, and the intellectual side of me is saying you shouldn't care because you shouldn't prioritize or make an identity based on these characteristics that you can't choose. It shouldn't matter. And so, but this is another thing, Armin Navabi from Atheist Republic was making this argument saying, I also don't care. It does not matter to me. Armin Navabi, he's also short. He's going to hate me for outing him. He's like my height. He's short. Yeah.
I've met Armin in real life. I've met
Yeah,
Armin in real life. He's an
he's a
absolute tank.
unit. Yeah, tank. But what he said is, but other people care about this sort of stuff. So therefore, it should matter because other people do care. But then I think about it, do they care because they cared from the beginning, or do they care because they're being told they should care over and over and over again? I mean, if there's a few words that I can think of that is just being shoved down everybody's throat, it's representation. That they're being told that. I don't know. All I can speak for is myself. If other people legitimately care about it and they feel left out because they're not being representative, well, okay, I hope you can play The Last of Us and you feel good about yourself. And I mean that genuinely.
Well, you
I
won't
hope
feel
that
good
you
about
feel
yourself afterwards. You'll be
better. You won't
depressed.
feel good about yourself because it's a really depressing game. It's way too long.
Oh,
It should have
God,
ended. There's no reason why they should have gone to Santa Barbara. The reason why Ellie refused to kill Abby makes no sense. It makes
Yeah.
sense to us because we saw her pass and we saw Ellie kill everyone that Abby loved, but it makes no sense to Ellie because she didn't have that information. She doesn't know. She killed like 1 million people on her way there.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no reason why she would stop at Abby. She doesn't know Abby's story. She was never told Abby's story. We know Abby's story, so it makes sense to us. It doesn't make sense to her. So the story's too long. I don't even like Ellie's character anymore. The reason why she was so interesting in the first game was because she was this very innocent-esque person. She killed before, and she swears like a sailor and stuff like that, but she's innocent within the context
Like
of what
Australian.
everybody else does there. Yeah, like an Australian. So Joel sort of introduces her into that world, and then we have this introduction of Ellie into this terrible, really grotesque, gratuitous world. And she also has a father figure there, a father figure who also lost his daughter, who's seen a daughter figure in Ellie. That was an interesting that dynamic is gone in The Last of Us Part 2 because Joel dies. And now for the rest of this game,
Hope everyone's
angry.
played it.
The game's old. You guys should have played it by now. And so now you have Ellie, who's just angry the whole game, and she's just this generic, boring character because she's just angry. Okay. So
I think she did have some nice character moments, like when that time she had to torture somebody for the first time. It's like she killed, but she hadn't tortured. You can see she was actually quite impacted by that.
Well, did you guys hear about the live-action TV series they're making on The Last of Us? They just has Pedro Pascal as Joel and someone else as Ellie. So they're actually having you'll actually be able to see this entire game series on a show.
Pedro Pascal, that's a good choice.
Pedro Pascal, best performance as the villain in Kingsman 2: The Golden Circle, not The Mandalorian. Kingsman 2.
I didn't because I didn't like Kingsman because Mark Miller, the guy who wrote Kingsman, I like it when he works on established characters, but when he goes off and does his own thing, it's just I think I wouldn't say it's bad. It's just not my cup of tea. It doesn't work for me.
You don't like the first Kingsman or
no, I didn't like it. I think that's more just personal taste than anything.
Yeah, no, I love the first Kingsman. Honestly, one of my favorite movies of all time. I love it.
But I like The Last Jedi. So I mean,
let's highlight some comments real quick because people are
raging.
Maybe try what is this?
Hydroxychloroquine.
What is this? Ivermectin? Let me see.
Minoxidil.
Minoxidil? Is that like some sort of? I'll look into this. I don't know what that is. Have you ever played Homeless or Professor? I'll be homeless. Moving to New York City. Oh, you need to fill me in on your life, Aporia. What's going on? You're moving to New York City? Are you going to NYU? Clone Wars. Yeah, so I would say it goes Revenge of the Sith is the best one, then the Clone Wars, and then the Phantom Menace way freaking last place.
Actually, I'll say this with Phantom Menace, at least you didn't have that horrible romance stuff with Hayden Christensen and Natalie Portman.
But you did get a cool meme that's popular right now.
Okay, I'm gonna fess up to something. I actually find Jar Jar funny.
Get the hell out of here.
Find the black stereotype funny? Wow, oops. Nick. I honestly didn't hate Jar Jar as much as everyone did. He was annoying, but
well, I know that if I was in a Star Wars movie, that's probably who I'd be. So, like,
yeah,
maybe it's
really, really sad to hear how the actor who played Jar Jar though went into like a full-blown depression because of how much everyone hated him.
Yeah, oh, that's terrible, dude. Yeah, I mean, I don't understand that. I mean, if you don't like the movie, don't like the characters, leave the fucking actors alone. Is it Jesus Christ? It's like, what the hell? See, okay, so we bitch all the time about social media turning people into assholes. Dude, this stuff, the behavior I see on Clubhouse, the stuff we see on Twitter, it just like, dude, did you just forget how to be a human being because you can hide behind a fucking computer screen?
Yeah.
Good thing Batman and Robin didn't come out when there was social media.
Oh my god. Good thing.
I'll
Jesus
say
Christ.
this. I'll say this about, Joel Schumacher. He took full ownership of the fact that movie sucked. Like, I respect him for that.
George Clooney did too, I think, also. Didn't he? Didn't he also say, like, yeah, the movie sucked?
Yeah, I think he said he ruined Batman or something like that.
I'll tell you, that's actually the first Batman movie I saw in the cinema when I was 7 years old. So I actually...
bombed away
Sorry.
Batman.
Sorry to hear that.
It's a break the ice. I actually have a bit of a soft spot. It's a bad movie, but I can't hate it for that. But something you guys should try is there's a drinking game where you have to drink every time Schwarzenegger makes a nice pun.
That's like every line in the movie, though.
Yeah. Every time Uma Thurman makes a sexual innuendo, every time Robin whinges. And it actually makes the movie amazingly entertainment if you're drunk.
I'll give it a go. I'm
Like, you
moving
might
to
wanna
Santa
take-
Barbara in a week, so I'll give it a go there.
Yeah,
With my
you might
new
want to take a
husband.
couple of days off work to deal with the hangover.
I won't. Oh my word. So generally, let's see, Aporia, game media is woke. Let's see if he's making an argument here. Generally, people have a bad tendency to apply legitimate criticisms to general culture to individual games or other media properties. Yeah, so this is like a huge problem, right? So when, my argument originally back then, it wasn't really an argument, but it was like, I understand why some people were annoyed with The Last of Us Part 2 because they interpreted it within like the general context of what the game's media is. So for me, it didn't really bother me that much because I focus on individual arguments. So a lot of people will say, well, you need to be careful with what arguments are being propelled at you by people like Dave Rubin because he associates with these people who are legitimate racists. So maybe he's just making that argument because he himself is hoping to prop up these other racists.
Maybe his brain is just in recovery mode.
I think he's just dumb. Yeah. But
he thinks Jesus was surrounded by Muslims.
Yeah. But with these people, it's like maybe it is the case. You can't know. And I think I brought this up to you actually last time we had a talk. And you could say, like, inductively speaking, well, it's likely that it is the case. Maybe, but if it is a situation in which it is likely that that is the case, well, I'll address his argument first, and then I'll say, well, also, recognize this. I won't just say, well, you're more likely just propping up these rates. Maybe it is the case that he's just doing that, but I'll address the argument while also addressing the general context there. So with The Last of Us Part 2, for me, I'll say, well, Neil Druckmann, the director of that game, he's not really wokey. I think he's just sort of a normal, average guy who will hear things like, pro diversity, pro this, and he'll say, oh, I guess, okay, yeah, sure, put that in the game. I think he's more that sort of guy than anything else. So I don't really care. It really doesn't matter to me. But my argument was just like, I understand why other people, it mattered to them much more than the average person, because they'll see pieces by Jason Schreier calling the gaming community filled with just a bunch of like these incel losers, and they'll be like, "Oh, fuck these guys." Yeah,
that's a great way. It's like the Democrats in 2016. Vote for us, you pieces of shit.
Yeah. So did the guy. Oh yeah, the kid who played Anakin, like the when he was in the Phantom Menace when he was like a little baby on Tatooine. Yeah, also like depression because people are dude, Star Wars. These nerds are losers. Like. I remember when I was a kid, so I used to like really hate against the prequels, mostly for narrative issues, right? So I'd be constantly against like, why did they introduce the midichlorians? Why are they introducing, why are they explaining everything in Star Wars? I'm 24 now. I don't care. I just care if it's a good movie now. But so now I just hate the prequels because they're just not good movies. I think they're boring. Narratively, they're dumb. They don't make any sense. So I don't like them for that reason. But for like the lore reasons, I don't really care that much anymore.
I'm 31. I've got a Power Rangers helmet behind me.
I noticed that. Also a picture of Tommy. Is that the Green Ranger?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one of the things. If you actually they actually did a new comic book series on it in 2016, and that was actually that was really good.
It was real. Like, I worked at Barnes and Noble when that comic book series came out. Super popular.
Hey Nick, can I ask what Zara thinks about that poster? I'm totally kidding.
Okay, like one night I was yeah, I'm pretty sure she's going to kill me at some point. I'm worried she might hear me.
Zara, you're awesome.
Oh god,
Yeah.
I love Zara.
Alright.
She's the best. She is
Yeah,
one of the
she's cool.
gutsiest people I know. Seriously, that woman is so brave.
So I've heard. Yeah, she's on the podcast. Friend of the show.
Yes.
Um,
Check her out on Twitter.
Zara's cool.
The Batman and Robin drinking game. Best way to see the film. There's so many movies that are fun to watch when you're under the influence of. Pick your preferred substance. I think the best. You know what's a fun movie to watch when you're drunk? If you want to do a drinking game, you gotta watch kids movies because they're really, really bad. So watch a movie like I was watching Alpha and Omega. I think it's like this Fox movie or something like that. That was fun to watch under the influence. You can watch movies like Sherlock Gnomes. That's a great one to watch. Have you heard of that one?
What's that?
It's a great movie. It's an animated movie. They're gnomes and like Sherlock Holmes is there. Academy Award winning movie, I'm sure.
Were you guys ever fans of Kiefer Sutherland's 24?
That was like in the early 2000s, wasn't it?
Okay,
the
so
Fox show, right?
I
Yeah.
watched most of the seasons, and there's a Jack Bauer drinking game. Which every time he says "damn it," you have to take a shot. I think Kiefer Sutherland was asked questions as to why he did why he says it so much. He's got all these hilarious clips on there, which he was told he sometimes would just yell "damn it, damn it, damn it," and just think about. I hope those college kids can keep up.
Is this
Very
true, by the way?
I'm sorry,
The guy who played the Red Ranger in gay porn. That's interesting. I don't know that. Sorry, I didn't mean to
he
interrupt
cut
you,
the
Bruce.
Austin St. John.
Yeah. I tell you what, Bruce, I reckon, do you follow any of the BJJ fanatics? Because I know you do jiu-jitsu. Like, do you follow, what's his name? Bernardo.
For real?
Yeah, for real. Like,
Bernardo
I
Faria?
should do a drinking game on his instructionals every time he says, huge honor for me.
No, I don't. It's I watch some videos on there, but I don't really I haven't followed Bronner for his career as close as I should have. Seems to be a really nice guy though.
Yeah, Vince, have you taken up jiu-jitsu yet?
No, I've been meaning to go to the gym.
Yeah, dude. Like Vince, you got to do it. I mean, all our favorite intellectuals do it. Peter Boghossian does it. Sam Harris does it.
I
Joe
do
Rogan
judo.
does it. Dude, Vince, join the program, dude.
Does Dave
Come
Rubin
to-
do it?
No.
Then I don't
No.
want to do it.
No, I'll tell you what. You got those intellectuals, BJJ, but judo has Vladimir Putin and Osama bin Laden.
What?
Hmm.
Osama bin Laden did judo?
Yeah, he did judo. See if I can find it.
Dang.
Yeah, we're not sending
No.
our best.
No, the issue is I just don't have
So
the time.
every modern day real life Bond villain does judo. Osama bin
Yeah.
Laden and Vladimir Putin, Bond villains, judo. I'm seeing a connection here.
Oh boy, yeah. I think there's more psychopaths in judo than there is in jiu-jitsu.
Damn. Yeah, I think for me the issue is just that I legitimately don't have the time. So this past year I've been going to school full time online, and I've been working full time as well. I've had Tuesday is my last day at work, and then I move back on campus. That's Osama bin Laden?
Yeah, it's Osama bin Laden on the right.
Jesus.
Smokes.
Yeah. So he did judo. See if I can find Vladimir Putin judo. Yeah, look, well, you can tell what I search a lot.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so Putin does it as well. Russia's like one of the best countries in the world for judo, though. So
No, they also have sambo.
yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever done sambo?
No, not really.
It's pretty good fun.
I like this comment. The duality of the Babylon Project. The implications of a homogenous society of the 21st century. Also Sherlock Gnomes. No, I watch a lot of movies. If there's one thing that I do outside the context of my school, what I do on YouTube and work, when I sit down and I just want to turn my brain off, I don't want to read, I don't want to research, I don't want to do anything. I'll watch movies. So I watch really bad movies. I'm going to Vegas next week, so I'm rewatching the Hangover trilogy to get me pumped up to go.
Have
So
you watched the latest Rick and Morty?
Season 5, no. I'm waiting for it to go on Blu-ray so I can just watch it all at once.
All right, yeah.
but I love Rick and Morty. That's a show that's a legitimately good show. It's really good, but it's poisoned by its ridiculous fan base. It's a shame that it has the fan base it does, but it's a good show. Let's see. And then people, including myself, unfortunately, overreacted to The Last of Us 2 because of his relationship with Anita Sarkeesian. I didn't know he had a relationship with her, but I still don't like the story of the game, but definitely overreact. I didn't even know he had a relationship with Anita. Maybe that would have changed my understanding. I didn't know Neil Druckmann had a relationship with her.
What's the story with her? Like, I've heard her name here and there. Like, she's really...
she's super woke feminist, super duper woke feminist. She laughed at Christopher Hitchens when he died because he says, "Oh wow, people are celebrating a guy who was Islamophobic. Like he deserved to die."
Jesus
basically,
Christ.
yeah.
But hang on, she's a feminist, but she's complaining about Islamophobia.
Yeah. Do you think these people make sense?
No. Okay. Yeah, my bad.
Yeah.
No moral consistency or any kind of or principles whatsoever is such bullshit.
This is why, like, I mean, if you guys ever heard of Mona Elthaway, I'm probably butchering her last name.
Yeah, I know her. Yeah.
Her, I can deal with her because, like, while she goes on, she is woke and she goes on rants about white men and stuff, she's consistent at least. Like, she's also stood up to clerical fascists in Egypt, and she criticizes what goes on in the Middle East. So I can actually deal with that, given that she's applies her values consistently.
Yeah, I don't mind reading people I disagree with. I mind when they come across as grifters.
Insincere. I mean, here's the thing: disagreement is fine. I would say it's encouraged because it actually forces you to dig, to develop, to refine your views. But the moment you start lying about someone's views, once you start inserting your own brand of hysterics, you've lost the plot. And when this whole ivermectin vaccine conflict started in the community, and I saw people who in my opinion should have been more receptive to the idea of dialogue, especially with all the issues we're seeing with the woke. This is one woman whose name I won't mention, but when she started going off on a tirade and just either outright lying or just or inserting her own brand of hysterics on the views of both Claire Lehman and Sam Harris, I lost all respect for her. I mean, like, disagreement's fine, but once you start going down that road, then I think you've lost your moral compass.
Yeah, did you listen to the episode Sam did with Eric Topol?
I listened to most of it. Yeah,
that was
a lot of hate. Yeah, it was good, but
that was a good episode.
Yeah, I think that I know we're almost at 2 hours and 15 minutes, but I was telling Bruce this, and I mentioned this on a podcast recently. I went to this libertarian convention in South Dakota, one of the whitest states in the United States. And so, first of all, screw that state because there's no Uber there. So I actually, for the first time in my life, I had to rewire my brain and remember what a shuttle was so I could go from the airport to the hotel. So that was weird. But what was weirder was in that convention, and I went, I'm not a libertarian, but I went because John McWhorter was a speaker there. Michael Shermer was a speaker there. They had cool people there, like especially Dave Rubin. I got a selfie with Dave Rubin. Not a selfie, sorry, but I was on Dave Rubin's Instagram story.
Was this before he became really silly?
Dude, this was like 2 months ago.
I see the grift, man. I see the grift.
Dude, if you ever have him on your show, can I come along? I just want to put his head on.
More than what I'm gonna have you along there. I'm gonna have Alcoholism on there. I'm gonna have everyone on there.
Invite Douglas Murray along as well.
I'll invite Douglas. I like Douglas Murray.
Okay, like, I mean, because I've had some issues with him, but like he's got my issues with him are like I can't say he's not a good writer. Like, he is a very articulate writer, and his prose is just phenomenal. It's just, and I think a lot of the writing he does on the problems with Islam and the woke, I think it's excellent. But then I question what he really stands for.
Have you read? I have the book here right there, as you can see.
Strange Death of Europe.
Yeah, have you read it?
Yeah, I've read it. I think for more or less, it is a pretty good book. Some of it does come across as hyperbolic, and like I think at one point he said that Sweden has the second highest rate of rape in the world, and that just doesn't sound accurate to me.
Yeah, let me double check that.
Yeah. Kind of more my issues with him is that I also read The Madness of Crowds. Like, I think they're both good books. But then he's also written pieces defending Marine Le Pen and Geert Wilders and dismissing any concerns people have with these politicians as leftist overreach. It's like, no, these people are genuine bigots and there's a good reason to be worried about them.
According to Nation Master, this is a .com website, so be careful with what it says. Sweden is number 6. So number 1 through 5 are African countries, with the exception of Bermuda. And then, so number 6. And then you have the United States at number 14, Belgium number 13.
The thing is, that would have to be reported, rape, wouldn't it?
This has got to be reported, yeah. And like obviously in a country like the United States, you're going to have higher reports than in a country like Mongolia. But yeah, I mean, this is super, like, rape was super duper difficult to get like proper stats on.
Yeah, but like I'd have to actually go through and refute each of his points one by one. It's just that he's someone I think people should absolutely read and engage with his work. Like I think his work is good, but there is just an underlying question to me of what does he actually stand for?
Mm-hmm.
I think
Douglas Murray. I would say Douglas Murray actually would be. I disagree with him to the same degree that I disagree with David Pakman. I think. I just wish. I think Douglas Murray. So the cool thing was that Douglas Murray was on David Pakman's show, so they actually had a conversation.
Oh, that was pretty good. Yeah, I watched that.
Yes. So David Pakman was saying everything that you're saying about like woke culture, I agree with. I just don't see that it's that big of a problem. And what annoyed me was that Douglas Murray was just going through anecdotes about how it's a big deal. It's like, well, just go to Thanksgiving. Like, what is it that you can talk about? And in my head, I'm like, you can easily bring up statistics about the woke phenomenon. Bring up the statistic by Fire that showed that over 50% of students think that they should be sheltered from beliefs that they deem harmful. Bring up the fact that an overwhelming amount of universities are hitting red level on free speech issues as opposed to green level. Bring up the fact that universities like the University of Cambridge is being lambasted for having the audacity, Oxford, for having the audacity to have Steve Bannon at the Oxford Union. And not only are people, sort of protesting it, whatever, if you want to protest it, that's fine, but people were blocking the entrance so other people couldn't enter. And those students were being defended by the university. Bring up stuff like that. It's easy to find statistics. Bring up the Eric Kaufman study that showed that over 90% of professors self-censor. It's really easy to show statistics for these things. And I don't understand why like the anti-woke people don't bring that stuff up. Or some of them do. A lot of them do, but Douglas Murray didn't.
Well, there's some legislation that's coming through here in Australia. I'd be keen to get your view on it. It's now going to be a criminal offence. They're punished by either, I think it's $5,000 fine or 6 months in jail if you show the swastika or Nazi symbolism.
Oof. Show it where? In public?
If you show it in public outside of like educational purposes.
I don't like that.
No, Nazism belongs rightfully in hell, but I think that treads really close to like the freedom of self-expression. I don't know what Australia's free speech laws are.
We don't really have free speech law
because
the United States is the only country with a free speech in their constitution.
I always I will always fall on the side of maximum free expression as much as possible, but it's a fundamental right that like as most of our favorite intellectuals would say is the bedrock value.
Yep.
Now the only decent pushback I've really heard about I've really heard about that so far is when listening to David Fuller this past weekend. I believe his position is also similar to mine, that he believes in and having free speech and making it accessible as possible. But he also said something along the lines that say that the truth wins out in the end. He thinks that's a naive view because with us separating into tribes on social media and online, what is truth really going to win out in the end with all these bubbles that we've made? Then okay, that's a good pushback right there. But then again, I would still err on the side that maximizes it, because while these separate bubbles are certainly interfering with our ability to perceive truth, then is it really any better to centralize it to an authority that thinks it knows what's best for you to know or not? And
It's like Hitch said, who would you trust to tell you what you can and can't hear?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
But, like,
these sorts of
like I was going to say, like, I mean, it makes me uncomfortable. Like, the thing is, like, on the side, if you have to defend people's right to have a swastika, and it's like, if you're going to make one exception on free speech, like, that may not be a bad one, because, like, I mean, I hate religion, but Nazism's worse than any religion on the planet.
Well, the
It's probably
deal
the
is,
most.
the ACLU before they decided to take a shit on their principles, they used to defend the rights of Nazis to march, I believe, and like I think the then Jewish head of the ACLU was asked, "Why are you defending Nazis?" And his response was, "I'm not defending Nazis. I'm defending your right to free expression." You know, it's it looks like you're making a deal with the devil here, but you know, when it comes down to your fundamental principles, you're really not.
Well, it's like, because the reasoning was that, these symbols and belief systems have led to atrocities and murder. It's like, yeah, but you can say the same about the holy books. And while they're not as bad as Nazi ideology, if that's the standard with which we're measuring it to, then the Bible should be banned, the Quran should be banned, the Torah should be banned.
Take this back to the time of the American Civil War, where like slavery was a socially acceptable practice. And you know, you had slave owners who said like, "Oh, you're saying all these nasty things. You're inciting bad feeling in our community. You're encouraging slave riots. You're encouraging violence. You should stop." And like, they would use these arguments against abolitionists, against a socially accepted practice that that had to be moved out of the way to expand the moral arc. Okay, so without that value, you know, in the end, like, you know, let me rephrase this. You took away the fundamental value that allows you to argue for free speech and that allow you to argue for further moral principles in the future. I mean, like, nowadays, like, we talk about veganism sometimes, Vince. You know, eating animals is still a socially acceptable practice. All right, and it seems that there's no substantial argument to say that it's not. Wait, I lost my phrasing here. There seems to be no real argument to say that we shouldn't treat conscious beings fairly, but yet it's still executed today. So,
well, look at factory farming.
Yeah, exactly. So, if we take away these our ability to speak, can we speak out against speciesism? Can we truly speak out for the rights of other sentient creatures? It's socially acceptable to continue that practice, but you need to be able to speak freely against it if you want to make any kind of progress whatsoever. And like, unfortunately, sometimes that means like you got to let people see like dirty shit. You know, we talk about like we talk a lot about you know, about freedom, but like, you know, hey, you got a responsibility to speak out as well. So, you know,
well, it's like I'm wearing like, this is a joke, but it's like,
yeah.
It's like, imagine if you decide to ban flat Earth ideology. It's like, that's basically saying, are you telling me you can't win an argument with a flat earther?
Yeah, should be easy. Let's address this one question that was asked twice. What do you think of the media's response to Joe Rogan taking ivermectin? So I know ivermectin was one of the things Joe Rogan took. He took a few things. I don't know the other ones, but what do you guys think of how the media responded to it?
The media is
one thing that needs to be one thing that needs to be pointed out is that Rogan, for a man in his 50s, he's in insane health and condition.
Yeah, insanely. You're saying, Bruce?
So the media was just the idea that it's taking horse dewormer. I believe that, go ahead and check me on this, but I believe that there's a form of ivermectin that like humans can ingest. That's made for humans, is there not? And the media, forget Joe Rogan for a second. There was an incident in which they I think they said that I forgot if it was a medical facility or that said that they had crowds of people coming in because they were taking just horse dewormer, and that Rachel Maddow was spreading it, MSNBC, and eventually you know, the word got out that they're just flat out lying, and everyone just doubled down. So Rogan did take ivermectin, but he also took a whole series of other drugs to help treat his condition,
which he can afford because he's a millionaire.
Yeah, exactly. So the thing is, I don't think that takes away from Joe in that, like, because he's a little weird. He's provided he's provided a platform that's pretty much held together the center, as Bridget Phetasy might say, for the last couple of years. And we have, and he allows for heterodox thinking, but you have to go and recognizing that, like, he doesn't really swing one way or the other. Well, okay, that's not entirely true, but he allows this pastiche of different viewpoints on his show. So, if people are thinking, oh, he's taking ivermectin, we shouldn't watch his show, I think that's bullshit. But, don't lie about what happened to him, and or what happened. I'm sorry. And is it really a morally honest argument to use to smear Joe Rogan? I would say no.
I think that he has. I'm going to be a little bit more critical. Like, I know he's gotten in hot water in the past for having right wingers on, but I think he did cross a line when he's had some of these, vaccine skeptical people on, like Brett Weinstein. And also he has talked about how I think he said his kids got COVID and it was no big deal. Like, I think with these sorts of, like, Vince, when I was on the podcast for the first time, we talked about the death of expertise. And I think this topic is just it's so dangerous, and there's just so much changing that it should be left up to people who actually know what the hell they're talking about. And it shouldn't be informed by anecdotes or any kind of, like, skepticism around vaccines unless you actually have some sort of medical degree or expertise in this area, because if it can lead to people not deciding that they're not going to take a vaccine, and they're not just endangering themselves, they're endangering other people. Or more extreme case, when you have the leader of the free world wondering out loud if we should try injecting bleach, people actually went and did it. So I think kind of my issue is that I think Rogan has crossed a line with the COVID, his discussions on COVID and vaccines. With the actual media coverage of it, believe it or not, I actually did watch a TYT segment. I'm sure there's some issues with TYT, but I think they actually did a pretty decent analysis of what he did wrong there.
Yeah, I know that there were. They did mischaracterize what ivermectin is. It is a horse dewormer for sure, but it's also a Nobel Prize winning medicine that can be applied to actual humans in a good dosage.
Yeah, it's used to treat liver blindness.
Yeah, exactly. Sobolatode is where are you? There you are. I'm from Mexico, and my friend is a doctor. They have been gushing or giving ivermectin for months. They don't know 100% if it works, but taking it with a doctor recommendation is harmless. Oh wait, really? Has Mexico been prescribing this? I don't know about how it goes in Mexico. The fact that the media and woke left, even Philip DeFranco said it was a drug for horses, is horrible. This is the thing where technically, yeah, it is given to horses, but you're losing the broader context there, Mr. Kano will be back in a few seconds. Yeah, and again, it's a political ploy there. Nope.
Can you mute him?
Can I?
Sure.
I think it's gone. I think it's gone anyways. But yeah, it's annoying, and it's only going to make things so much worse. We're getting a bunch of, I guess there's a chemical spill at my university. Can I move in?
Chemical spill.
The media reacted in the worst way possible. Stop conspiracy theories. The reaction makes conspiracies. Sorry for my bad English. No, it's okay. And yeah, you're right, where it's like, I'm siding with you on this, but your arguments are garbage. Your arguments involve manipulating people into believing things that aren't true. Only because you are using bombastic language, they are under the impression that the other side must be crazy. And that's not the case. You are... I hate using first of all, this podcast is going to get nuked. It might give us I'm actually worried this podcast might give us a strike. I'm actually worried about this because Brett Weinstein's podcast is almost wiped out. They're already demonetized. They can't get any money. And I think if they get one more strike, their channel gets taken down, if I'm correct. So YouTube is acting very concerningly about this. For all I know, I already got an email from these guys saying that I better shut up about it. But yeah, just for clarification, don't take ivermectin. Get the vaccine. Get vaccinated. All right, Bruce, you were vaccinated, right?
I've been double vaxxed. Yeah.
Okay.
The yeah. I mean, I don't know what to say here. I'm not so sure I agree. Like Joe Rogan crossed a line. Like, you know, I'm very thankful that like he has. I'm very thankful that he's a weird guy, but he's, you know, at heart he's I do think he's a fairly decent person. I like, you know, I
agree.
like what he does in general.
Yeah.
But like, you know, however, I mean, he's had Alex Jones on. Alex Jones.
Yeah, but that was for shits and giggles.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's like you get to hear a variety of viewpoints, which is a great thing. Not so great when you can't separate the wheat from the chaff. And while we should definitely encourage expertise and promote people who have a vast amount of knowledge to share with the public, the disadvantage there is if what happens when that expertise cannot be trusted. We've seen that with the social justice movement, and let's face it, there's good, you know, I'm definitely pro-vax. I don't think our institutions have been corrupted to the point where like we can't trust data about them. But let's face it, like, you know, the people who are very skeptical about the COVID vaccines, I am sympathetic to that because, you know, how has COVID been handled in a myriad of ways? Not very well. You see how some places were forced to lock down and some places were just free to open up, and there wasn't too much daylight between two facilities with these kind of restrictions. One place was allowed to be completely open, like this is back during December or whatnot, and like one place was not, and people lost their businesses, lost their homes. People were told to wear masks one second, they were told not to wear them in the other, and there's just a whole lot of skepticism, which I really cannot blame people for.
Well, it didn't help that it was fucking Trump in charge of the first outbreak.
Right, but you know, then again, with all due respect to Brett and Heather, you know, I still appreciate the two of them, but you know, I think they've just gone way too far with their narrative on ivermectin. And do they have anything really substantiating their claims other than claiming that they want to present an unorthodox view? I'm sorry, that's just not good enough. And you just can't claim postmodernism here, postmodernism there, however you damn well please. We know the social justice departments have been proven beyond a doubt to have been this thoroughly corrupted. We see it everywhere now. We know where it came from. Have our medical institutions been infiltrated to this degree? I don't think so. I don't think so. And for him to do this, I think I'm sorry. I just think it's kind of foolish for some of his intellectual stature to do so.
Especially when the stakes are this high.
Yeah, I mean, like, the thing is, can you get ivermectin to these people, or are other vaccines at hand? Like, you know, what's worse at this point in time? Those factors have to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, I'll speak like for my reasoning behind, because like I was originally not too keen on the idea of getting AstraZeneca. I thought I'll wait for Pfizer because, like, I mean, that was back when we didn't have an outbreak. COVID was under control. But then when the Delta outbreak happened, I spoke with my doctor and she told me that you've got a better chance of getting a blood clot from COVID or Delta than you have from the vaccine. And I saw the numbers. Like, I mean, we had about maybe 100 cases a day at that point, and now we're up to about 1,500. So I was thinking the risk, you know, the benefit outweighs the risk, and I went and got it.
All right, well, fellas, I think we're gonna have to end the podcast here. We did a pretty good 2.5 hours. That's pretty. When Nick is on, time flies by like crazy, especially when we talk about Star Wars.
The masterpiece that is The Last Jedi.
The masterpiece that is the Clone Wars.
This was the longest podcast ever. I think it was thanks to Nick's white privilege that we were able to last this long.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I gave you guys more bandwidth as a result.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did not lose connection once. That's because Nick uplifted us with his privileged Australian connection. That was so great. But Nick, thank you so much for joining us for this very special live stream that is probably gonna give us a strike on YouTube because we've used too many naughty words. Yeah, but
well, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, no, thanks for joining. This is fantastic, and it's a shame that we could only plug your Twitter and not a YouTube channel or anything brand like that. But what is your YouTube channel if you want to disclose it?
It's Nick Carno. Is it Nick Carno 90? Yeah, Nick Carno 90.
He has a picture of a martial artist there. That's pretty.
Don't anymore. I've changed.
Oh, what is it now?
If people want to follow me, I'll just share my screen quickly.
Oh, okay.
So that's me.
Oh, there.
And
that's your.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I made a dad joke before. Hang on, where is it?
The most recent parts of the Caribbean had to be censored for violence. Otherwise, all right. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and take out that. So, but anyways, Nick, yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again in the future for countless streams. So do not die.
No, I'll try not to. I won't let any crocodiles kill me.
Yeah, I mean, you're used to it. Hopefully, we'll visit Australia once COVID is officially dead in 9 years, or who knows, maybe it'll go on further than that. It's been forever. Jesus Christ, COVID has been going on for way too long now. Can we
It's like
kill
a
this
giant
thing
science
already?
experiment, isn't it?
I'm tired. I'm bored of it, honestly. I'm bored. Like, it's not. It was interesting when Nicholas Christakis was writing Apollo's Arrow, and when we were listening to podcasts between Sam Harris and Paul Bloom. I'm bored of it now. I'm bored. Can we move on? I just want to kill it already, man.
Now, one last meme. Hang on.
All right. Boo, worst apocalypse ever. There we go.
Yeah.
I wonder how many people here even know the Muppets. I mentioned the Muppets to my coworkers whose average age was 16, I guess, 18 probably. Had no idea what the Muppets were, who Jim Henderson is. So I'm old, is what I'm saying.
Dude, I'm 31. How do you think I feel?
Man, you're like 6 years older than me. I'm almost there.
Yeah.
But all right. Thank you so
you.
much, guys. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us on this live stream. Hopefully, we'll do this more. Actually, I don't even know if it's going to be more consistently because since I'm moving out, I'm going to have roommates. It's going to be weird doing these live streams with these paper-thin, probably paper-mache walls. Who knows how broke my university is. So we'll see what happens. But anyways, guys, have a good night, everyone, or have a good day if you're like Nick Hano and you live just throw down away. But everyone, thank you so much. Have a good night.
Take care, guys.
All right.